Reincarnation is a rather common belief among Eastern philosophies. That being said, it tends to find its way into all of the media produced by Eastern artists, most visibly seen in anime and manga, to which it has its own genre known as isekai. Despite the fact that the Naruto series does indeed possess reincarnation, we've really only seen two people do it, Indra and Asura, as well as their incarnates, Hashirama Senju and Madara Uchiha. But even then, that's not entirely reincarnation, as Madara and Hashirama's souls were sent eventually to the Pure Land, with Hashirama having been inside of the Shinigami's belly for around 3 or 4 years. But on the topic of reincarnation, if Indra and Asura could do it via chakra alone, is it possible that anyone could do it? Welcome to the Amagi. Before we begin, only 25% of our viewers are subscribed, so if you're a fan of the video, please like and double check if you are subscribed, and with that out of the way, let's get into the video. That fateful night, told and retold 1,000 times before and 1,000 times more, Minato and Kushina prepared for their child. But as the mother of this babe gave birth, the father was fighting his own battle, keeping the rampaging chakra of the Nine Tails at bay with nothing but his own chakra and the sweat from his brow. As he did so, he began to wonder within himself how it was that Kushina could possibly do this 24/7. He knew she could give out, as was the case when she nearly killed him while trying to confess her love to him all that time ago. These days, they looked back on it and laughed. Minato even still had the scar from it. He used to joke with her and say that Cupid missed the first shot when she would comment on it, but at that time it was serious. And now that he was in this moment, holding the beast back himself, he began to think to himself that maybe it wasn't something to laugh about. Maybe it was a more serious matter than he was led to believe. At this moment, he gained a new respect for Jinchuriki everywhere. As the wailing of the child reached his ears, he knew that the worst was behind him. As Kushina caught her breath, Minato slowly found her trying to take back over with her chakra. He kept a steady stream going to help her keep her balance. She looked at him with tired eyes, but spoke as if what she just did was nothing. Her voice was hoarse, but her mind was sharp. Wow, that was impressive. I might make a good Jinchuriki out of you yet. Minato scoffed. No, never. I fear I don't have the discipline it takes to be a proper Jinchuriki. As the baby was cleaned, it was then presented to its mother. Or so fate should have seen it go. But a specter of the past, resurrected by a ghost, appeared in a world where it was not supposed to exist any longer. It took the baby up in its arms and threatened harm upon it unless the Nine Tails were given to it. Now, this was not a choice Minato was equipped to make. You could not ask the leader of a village to give up its most powerful weapon, and you couldn't ask a new father to give up the child he had just helped deliver. So Minato did the only thing he could, which was the one thing that lined up for both. Rushing the man with the strength of a warrior and the rage of a lion defending its cub. He utilized every ounce of his speed, moving so quickly that he let out a sonic boom. There was nothing in the world faster than Minato, save light itself. Or so he believed. The moment he hit the ground, he found his beloved wife as well as this specter from the past gone. He had somehow escaped Minato's grasp. That was impressive. But what was equally impressive was the fact that he managed to fill the baby's swaddling clothes with paper bombs. Minato noticed them only just in the nick of time. Utilizing his flying Raijin jutsu, he teleported back home. This was where he was planning to bring Kushina, a nice property off the main village, yet still within the protective barrier and its walls. It was a place where they could have a little privacy while raising an infant. They planned to return to their home in the village proper when the babe was old enough for solid foods, and now he was walking in alone. Well, not alone, with Naruto, but without Kushina, so it felt like he was alone. Coming to a large bed that could easily house 3, Minato let the child down. He would bring back its mother, and then this night, the 3 of them would all sleep together in this bed. But first, he had to bring her back. The good news was he had thought ahead and had planted the flying Raijin seal on her 8 trigram seal at a point after their marriage. She had been teaching him all of the hidden techniques of the Uzumaki, and as his final test, she had tasked him with incorporating his own flying Raijin seal into her seal without disrupting the flow of chakra, or negating the seal's ability to do its job properly. He thought it was an unnecessary risk when he could put the seal elsewhere. Yes, he had many ideas for that, but no, she dictated that it should go there to prove that he had learned everything she had to teach him, letting her know that he was truly worthy of calling himself an Uzumaki, the same as she was capable of calling herself a Namikaze by learning all the techniques he called signatures, including the flying Raijin and the Rasengan. He would teleport to her with this seal he had altered and found her tied up and left to die. As soon as he inspected the seal, he knew that someone had jailbroken it, having shredded the sealing formula to ribbons, like a child trying to get to the contents of a present on Christmas Day. It hurt him to seal it, knowing that this seal was often painful when tampered with. He broke her free. That's when she told him, "Nine Tails escaped." She lifted a finger and pointed in the direction of the village. Minato hadn't noticed it before, but a massive creature the size of a mountain was standing in the village's heart. He looked back at her, knowing that without this thing she would die. It was then that the masked man from before appeared. Minato lay his wife down and turned to him. "You really messed up, pal." The two would fight, but Minato would quickly prove to be the superior. Having witnessed his wife in this state and knowing that his village was under attack, Minato didn't play around. He didn't have the time to. With one quick, decisive blow, he took out the man's arm, causing it to slough off to his feet. The man, realizing he was never any match for Minato, or at least he wasn't yet, would then teleport away. Minato would spit toward the man and then return to his wife to find her barely conscious. He would quickly teleport her back to their home where he would lay her with Naruto. "Here, rest, play with the baby, keep yourself occupied. I'm going to get your beast back. Then when I seal it back into you, we're all gonna snuggle. Just think of it that way. The same way you stabbing me all those years ago turned into something to laugh at. This will too." He kissed her cheek and headed out. With the benefit of his flying Raijin, no place was too far, nor was it ever too slow. Standing atop the carving of his own head, he looked out to the village as if challenging the beast outright. Oh yes, he was going to challenge it. Challenge it to take his joy away. "Beast!" he shouted. The Nine Tails looked in his direction with a sneer. It roared at him, but for a moment Minato almost swore he heard it say, "Challenge accepted." He ran down the mountainside as the nine-tailed beast swept its massive claw across the landscape, throwing earth and building alike into the air. As Minato hit the ground, he just barely had enough time to dodge the incoming debris. The beast prepared for another volley. Minato rushed forward so quickly that he left a trail of electricity behind him. This was how he got his name, and was how he was going to have the Nine-Tails remember him. As the second wave of buildings came down, he bobbed and weaved with inhuman ability, stopping on a dime and bursting in another direction like an arcing bolt of plasma. He got close enough and reached out to touch Kurama. "Tag, you're it!" Suddenly, the two of them teleported out of the village proper and back to the house. However, Kurama was crafty and had planned for this. Sadly enough, just as Kushina knew her husband well, the beast inside knew him well too. And knowing that he would be teleported, he charged an attack to retaliate without any slowdown as soon as they were on the other side. This resulted in a roar so powerful that the concussive force leveled the area around it. This, in turn, blew away the Namikaze household. Kushina and the baby went flying. She tried to catch it midair but failed. The baby landed away from her. Despite her condition, she stood and raced to it. She lifted the baby up into her arms, but to her horror, it was not breathing. In a panic, she raced out to the battlefield. "Minato! Minato! Naruto isn't breathing!" she cried out. Minato turned back for a moment, but there was nothing he could do. He needed to seal the beast away, quickly. Then they could think of something. "Kushina, are you ready to take the beast back?" he called out. She shook her head. "Minato, I'm already too far gone. You can't save me. But if you seal the beast into Naruto, you can save him." Minato looked back. "Kushina, this is no time to tell lies. I know you can survive this," he told her. She shook her head. "I swear it on Naruto's life, Minato. Even if you seal it into me now, I'll still die." He was appalled by this answer. She looked to him. "Please, save Naruto. The tailed beast infusion will restart his heart and maybe bring him back to life." Minato roared to the skies in frustration. "Fine, get it ready." He returned to battle against Kurama. Kushina began setting it up. She knelt down beside Naruto as he laid upon a little bed-shaped altar. She kissed his head. "This will save you, Naruto. This will save you." She then began to perform the sealing ritual. As she did so, Kurama sensed what was going on. "No, I will not be sealed again." He knocked Minato to the side and began to charge. She couldn't deal with that now. She needed to finish the seal no matter what. No matter if it killed her, she needed to finish it. She heard the beast's footsteps behind her, the thudding of each titanic paw as it dug a new crevice into the earth and stones. But then there's a sharp squish, the sound of crunching bones as the keratin of a claw passed through. But it was not Kushina who'd been stabbed. She looked back for a moment to see Minato single-handedly holding the Nine-Tails back with his own body. The massive beast was held by the claw. It was a miracle that it didn't tear Minato in half and just keep going. But in all truth, it might have simply been Minato's willpower, and the pure force of his chakra that held the beast back. Kushina wanted to scream. She wanted to cry, but all the same she realized that she was currently feeling the same thing Minato was. At least they'd be together in death, even if it meant leaving Naruto behind. She turned back to complete the ritual, and as soon as she did, the hand of the Shinigami appeared and gripped the Nine Tails, ripping it through the hole it had made in Minato's chest and then down into the baby, where it would be locked behind a swirling seal, identical to the one Kushina had on herself, but perhaps even stronger. The moment she did, however, Minato fell to the ground, lifeless, his eyes half rolled up in his head. Kushina lamented that they could share no final words together and kissed his blood-stained blonde hair before having her soul ripped out by the Shinigami. Now here is the tragedy of this tale. While Naruto's heart did indeed start beating again, the soul of Naruto had left long ago. While Kushina did not believe this, the Shinigami had known it from the start, and as such, following her instructions, it knew that the seal she was using could not work on a deceased host. So it decided to listen to the secret desires of her heart, which was a desire to save her husband however she could. And considering that his body had been totaled, the Shinigami had decided that since there was a perfectly good shell here without a soul, that maybe he would simply reincarnate Minato by putting his soul into the child's body. That was what had happened. When gripping the chakra and soul of Kurama, the Shinigami had grabbed Minato's as well, and pulled both into the shell, causing it to burst back to life with a wail and a cry. Alone and with nobody, the newly reincarnated Minato kicked and grasped helplessly into the night, the mind and body of an infant regressing him back to the earlier stages of life, locking who he truly was behind a gate of age. Hiruzen would not long after find the baby and assume that Naruto had survived. Minato would be taken to the hospital where they would officially give him the name Naruto. Minato slept through this. He was tired. The babe's body was not nearly as hardy as his own. It had been hurt indeed, but the brunt of the damage done had been healed by the Nine Tails' energy as it sought to repair the damage quickly so as to not die immediately. Though freedom might occur with the death of the host, death was still something that an immortal being such as Kurama feared. So the beast quickly repaired all of the major damage. Minato had no grasp on time or anything. He hardly had the faculties to think. Language skills, everything he was before had been confiscated, and he'd been left as a bare-bones form of himself. His eyes could barely open, he was so tired, but when they did, all he saw was a blurry image, like staring through water. The first few years of his life were unremarkable, as he was treated just as a Jinchuriki of the beast that nearly destroyed the village, with hesitation, contempt, and an overwhelming urge to see the situation just go away. And so, as soon as he was able to think for himself, he did. By the time Minato was living by himself, he was starting to grow conscious of the fuzzy images in his head. Thoughts and dreams too vivid to be imagination. It had to be something else, but what was it? He went to the academy, and while there, he found that he somehow already knew the things that they were teaching him. It seemed like child's play. But then again, he was a child, and why would he think it anything less? All of these contradictions in his mind really began to pick up as time passed along. The village seemed to revile him for some reason. A reason Minato couldn't put his finger on, but somehow understood. He didn't much care that his village disliked him. He simply wanted them to be happy, and so he was always there with a helping hand should they require it, even if they were ungrateful to have it thereafter. Upon returning home, he felt empty. He felt like something was just missing. Nothing physical, of course. He tended to get whatever he wanted from Hiruzen. If it was a new Shinobi Station 5 with 2 dual Shuriken 5 controllers, sure, he got it. If it was the new Kagemasa Blood and Fog DVD special, he got that too. He wanted for nothing, but deep down, none of these material pleasures fulfilled him. There was a hole in his identity that he could not quite fill. So he decided to go on a journey of self-discovery to find out what that was, to explain all the weird occurrences he was experiencing, and the feeling that something was wrong. And so he would find a quiet place, sit down, and meditate. He would begin to search the deepest parts of his soul, looking for answers. He hadn't expected to find something else sitting there. Coming upon a cage, he found it. The Nine Tails. "Whoa, what are you?" he asked flatly. The beast's eyes, glowing like embers in the night, gazed down at him. It was so much taller than he, even when it was lying flat. But for some reason, he felt as though it were originally far bigger. It's like what he remembered was it being bigger, despite the fact that he wasn't even quite sure what he was looking at. "What are you?" he asked it again. The beast rushed and pressed against the gate with a deafening clang of flesh and bone colliding with adamantine bars. Its claws shot through the bar in hopes of rubbing Minato out of existence like a tiny bug. It growled and snarled at him as the claws came just feet from his face. "Well, now I know where not to stand," he said as he saw the indentation carved into the ground. He looked back to the cage. Given the nature of your claw, I'd suspect you're not human and just a feral monster. So why was I expecting you to answer my question?
I hate you,
a deep guttural growl said. Minato was confused. Wait, you can speak? But almost as soon as that question entered his head, it was gone. Why do you hate me? The eyes burned even brighter with rage now.
Do you not remember why? Have you forgotten what you've done to me?
Minato nodded. I mean, honestly, it was the truth.
Then allow me to jog your memory.
Kurama forced Minato down memory lane by awakening his old memories, supplementing them with Kurama's own to validate what was true and what was fantasy. All of this information rushed through Minato's mind at once, and all the more the rest of his memories came flooding back. Like a dam letting loose its water, memories, an entire lifetime came rushing back to him. Minato was living an entire life in the span of a few moments. When he came back to his senses, Kurama was now lurking toward the back of the cage.
That's why I hate you.
Minato was shocked and appalled, and his mind was racing faster than a speeding bullet. He didn't have the constitution for this, not now. His identity had been shattered. Only now did he realize that his mind had been broken into pieces and hidden away. He was living 2 lifetimes at once. Who he was as Naruto and who he was as Minato were entangling, and he wasn't sure what to do with this information. So he left his subconscious immediately. Back in his bedroom, he quickly stood from his meditative position and fled from it with a gasp, turning back to look at the area where he'd been sitting only moments earlier, as if something had touched him. But no, it was all due to his experience within his own mind. He stumbled to the bathroom, where he felt he might throw up. He had gone into his own head, searching for answers, and, well, he'd found them. But they were all a confusing, jumbled mess, all of which were competing with his current set of memories. His mind was unable to set those memories on a 4D linear path. They all seemed to be existing at the same time. He tried to calm himself down and stop his mind from rejecting the new memories. He had gone looking for answers, not to have himself driven insane by what he found. He would go to the sink and splash his face with cool water, and as he did, he felt his nerves calming down. It felt like a jack-in-the-box. His memories held behind a box that he found himself cranking, and without warning, it all jumped out at him. Now, to protect himself, he needed to put the jack back into the box for a second, trying to push all the memories he didn't recognize away for a moment. All he needed to do was examine each memory one by one, and surely his subconscious would be able to set up a timeline of events. Calm now, he began to gaze back at the most recent memory unlocked for him. He saw a woman with red hair. That's my wife. Her name was Kushina. He followed the memory. Oh, I became a father. I was so happy. He then saw the masked man take up the baby. His grip on the counter grew tighter. I rescued it though. It was safe. He was then shocked. Wait, Kushina's gone? Where did she go? The memories played out until he reached his home during his battle with the Ninetales. He suddenly heard a voice shout out to him, and it sounded like Kushina's voice. Minato! Minato! Naruto isn't breathing! It was suddenly then that Minato's mind frayed for a moment. 2 massive questions with continuity flashed into his mind, which left him on the ground, gripping his head. His breathing quickened as he tried to make sense of this. First off, it seemed as though he was saddened by the death of his own son, but at the same time, that son was him. How could this be? What was this? He felt the searing pain of having his lungs and organs ripped to shred by the Ninetales' claw. Gripping at his chest, Minato fell back, unable to catch his breath. He cried out from the pain. It was all a phantom pain now, he wasn't truly experiencing it, but the memory of it was sealed into his mind, and it felt as if it were as real as the ground he was laying upon. As the pain and adrenaline balanced out, Minato could feel his senses returning. He witnessed the face of a Shinigami, its hand reaching out toward him. He suddenly felt as if he were ripped out, entangled with a flame of fire, ready to consume his very soul, and like that, he was sealed into the child, the last thing his eyes witnessing being his own body falling lifelessly to the ground. Then there was darkness, followed by a bright light and a fog-concealed face. Minato lay there for a second as his body began to regain control, accepting the memory. He struggled to sit up before standing, and as he did, he leaned on the cabinet where he looked at himself in the mirror. Tears began to roll down his cheeks. Kushina! It was then that the love of a husband to a wife was restored to him, and then ripped away again at the knowledge that she had been killed, her soul devoured by the Shinigami. Kushina! His voice uttered through a higher-pitched squeak that signaled the loss of control of his emotions. He stumbled back to his room, emotions draining his physical strength. Falling into the bed, he lay there, realizing that the only reason why he was alive now was because Kushina had died to seal his soul. But that was only half the pain. He realized that his own newborn son had perished that day, with Minato's own soul merely inhabiting the shell of his son's body. Looking at his tiny hands, Minato lost control again, and wept openly and loudly for the child he had just barely met. Hiruzen walked from the streets into the building's stairwell. He began to ascend. He had received a call from the landlord of the building that some of their tenants had sent in complaints. According to the landlord, the people in the apartments surrounding Naruto's had heard a loud disturbance coming from within, to which the landlord said they could only describe as a child screaming and crying. Unsettled, they called the landlord, who would then call Hiruzen since he was the one financially responsible for the apartment. Hiruzen was on his way there now. He knew Naruto, and knew that he was a kind and mild-mannered young man who didn't like to cause issues for anyone. Rarely visibly sad, if Naruto were crying now, something must be wrong. For this issue, Hiruzen was sure the boy had hurt himself somehow and needed help, so he was coming as fast as he could to the apartment. He stepped up to the door and beat upon it 3 times. "Naruto! Naruto, if you're there, open this door!" After a second passed, Hiruzen knocked another 3 times, this time louder. "Naruto!" When there was no response, Hiruzen began to feel as though his heart were going to stop. He pulled out a spare key and unlocked the door. He rushed through, his strides longer than usual, his movement with the vigor of a man half his age. "Naruto!" He didn't see any sign of him. He moved to the bedroom to see him curled up in bed. Hiruzen rushed to his side and rolled him over on his back. He saw tears drying upon the boy's face. He quickly began to check him over for any injuries. It was these actions that caused Naruto's eyes to open. Hiruzen saw this and sighed in relief. "Why didn't you answer me when I was calling you?" Naruto just turned away from Hiruzen and returned to laying on his side. "Are you okay?" "No," the voice of the child stated. Once again, Hiruzen's BPM rose. "What's wrong?" Naruto managed to sit up on the bed. "Kushina," he said. Hiruzen was struck by the statement of the woman's name. "Where did you hear that name?" Hiruzen asked. He specifically had hidden Naruto's parents from him, as well as the entirety of his origin for fear that the emotional outburst might weaken the seal and allow Kurama to escape. He had also sworn the entire village to silence. When Hiruzen figured out who told Naruto this, there would be hell to pay. Naruto turned to look at Hiruzen. "Kushina Uzumaki. Minato. Naruto." Hiruzen sat down on the bed and put his hands on Naruto's shoulders. "Where did you hear these names? Who told you this?" The red and bloodshot eyes of Hiruzen's young charge looked up into his. "I remembered it." That was impossible. Nobody could remember events from the day they were born. Memory wasn't even proven to start reliably forming until the age of 2, so the concept that a child could remember their own birth was ludicrous. Yet Naruto insisted. But what he said next blew him away. "It was me. I was the one fighting." Hiruzen was confused. Naruto had the beast sealed inside of him, but he was not physically fighting the Ninetales. Naruto spoke again. "Hiruzen, I'm Minato. Minato Namikaze." Hiruzen smiled and shook his head. "You're just confused, Naruto, that's all." Naruto then said something. "You were disgraced after ending the war with a peace treaty, a war we were going to win. That was when I was elected to be Hokage. You petitioned me personally before the Fire Daimyo. Do you remember what I said when you told me? I said, I'll do my best, but don't be surprised if I drop the ball on it." Hiruzen was shocked. This was something Minato had said to him in private, long before Naruto had even been conceived. Hiruzen sat there. "Minato?" The boy nodded. "But how is that possible?" Hiruzen asked. Minato looked down at his son's tiny hands, the hands he had inherited. "I'm not sure why, but when Kushina went to seal the Ninetales into the baby, it took me with the beast. I think it was because Naruto was..." Minato covered his mouth as the tears began to form again. Hiruzen began putting things together. The Shinigami could have easily done this. The technique used, the Reaper Death Seal, was not a technique that one simply created. No, the technique was a ritual that summoned the god of death. The Shinigami had its own mental capacity and its own personality. If Kushina was trying to seal the beast into a dead body, it's possible that the Shinigami had decided to rectify this doomed sealing by giving new life to the body, including the soul of a living person to survive within the child. And given that the only people there it could use to fulfill this duty were Kushina and Minato, the Shinigami could have only chosen Minato, as Kushina's soul was already forfeit. The boy that Hiruzen could now recognize as none other than Minato sat there with his hands over his mouth, tears streaming from his eyes, body shaking. He hadn't seen Minato like this in a long time. He had never seen Minato in this emotional state though, not even when he was a child. He had never seen his successor so helpless, so vulnerable. He pulled Minato into a hug. "It's okay, Minato.
Your child is okay. No doubt he's being cared for by my wife in heaven. Buako was always a tough and strong woman, and she held beliefs that the strong should protect the weak, so Naruto's in good hands."
Minato just sat there, staring off blankly from his watering eyes.
"Kushina should be with him. Kushina shouldn't be relegated to the Shinigami. They should both be alive right now. I failed them."
Hiruzen shook his head.
"No, you didn't fail them, Minato."
Minato looked up at Hiruzen.
"No, I failed them. If I had been faster, I could have saved them."
Hiruzen wasn't sure how to comfort him now. He was tortured by memories he should not have sought for.
"Minato, I can't say anything that would bring them back, but I can say this. You came back to us for a reason, and whatever that reason is, I'm sure it will prove to be worthy of the sacrifices you've made. But you have to have faith. I'm certain there's a way to free Kushina's soul and allow her to go to heaven where Naruto is. And then, when your life comes to an end, you'll also be reunited with them. So try not to focus on what you couldn't do, but instead focus on what you can do. And right now, that's freeing Kushina and finding out for what purpose you've returned to us."
Hiruzen stayed with Minato for about an hour before returning to the Hokage's residence. Minato would spend the rest of his night trying to decipher his memories, even though some of them he knew could only bring him pain, such as the death of Obito and Rin. He knew that these memories were his birthright, and so he began to focus on unlocking all these memories of his past, forming them into one timeline. The day after, he decided to do some more looking into at least freeing the soul of Kushina from the Death Seal. As he studied it, however, a news story broke that caught his eye. Massacred, the Uchiha clan comes to an end at the hand of one of its own. Minato was shocked. He had served beside so many Uchiha clan members during the Third Shinobi World War. He considered Fugaku to be one of his closest friends. The shock only grew when word reached that the perpetrator was Fugaku's own son, Itachi Uchiha.
"No way. Itachi did this? That's impossible. Itachi was such a kind and sweet boy. I won't lie and say he wouldn't kill, but he was a pacifist at heart. If he killed anyone, it was on orders and for a bigger reason."
It was because Minato had known Itachi so well that the story of a rogue shinobi seeking only power and to prove himself was unreal to him. Itachi was not a prideful sort. On the contrary, he was very humble. None of this made sense. Minato needed to get to the bottom of this. As he thought about all the different things that happened over the past few years, from his reincarnation due to this masked man's interference, as well as his need to help Kushina get free from the Reaper Death Seal, and now the Uchiha clan massacre, he knew that fate had likely set things in motion to help him solve these issues as they came. Knowing this, Minato set out to discover the truth behind his circumstances, and the circumstances that the village set it in. The yellow flash was back, and soon the whole world would know it. The academy. Very few could keep up with Minato. To him, this was a waste of time, but all the same, he wanted to do it. Hiruzen had given him the chance to decide to do anything he wanted, including graduating early, but Minato didn't wish to do so. His reasoning for this was that he simply wanted to see how the future generations of shinobi were growing, in a world where intelligence was increased, where teaching styles had improved, and where peace had provided every tool required to foster growth. Minato wanted to see what would become of this generation, and so Hiruzen let him do just that. Minato always aced his tests, scoring near perfect hundreds almost every time, with only a few trick questions, history questions involving dates, and certain math questions eluding him. All that being said, he also often signed his paper wrong. It seemed a strange thing that such a smart student could get the easiest question of all wrong. What is your name? The paper couldn't even be properly graded without this question being answered. None of this truly mattered though in the case of his career. Given his intelligence and his extraordinary chakra reserves, Minato could go to Jonin right now if he wanted to. He simply wanted to gauge the other children. He looked over Shikamaru, Choji, and Ino. Those three were the next generation of the Ino Shikacho trio. They were to follow in their parents' footsteps. What a heavy legacy to try and live up to. Minato firmly believed that it was only because he wasn't under any pressure that he got to the point he was at. He'd never known his parents and had never seen another shinobi of his clan. He was a true nobody. Given that, he never had to worry about living up to anyone's expectations. It was because of this that he felt free to move at his own pace. It was the freedom and lack of expectations that allowed him to grow so quickly. They, on the other hand, had legacies to live up to. As he looked at them though, he could tell that they didn't really seem to care about the kind of shinobi that their parents wanted, so much as the kind of shinobi that they wanted to be. And in the end, having known Shikaku, Inoichi, and Choza personally, he assumed that this was the type of shinobi they expected their children to be. He then looked over and noticed Hinata Hyuga and her cousin Neji. Both were quiet, but neither for the same reason. Hinata was quiet because she was kind and shy, easily emotional, and had a heart big as all outdoors. She wouldn't hurt a fly, and that was precisely the reason that Minato felt like she would likely not make a very good clan head. Or maybe that's why she would make for the best kind of clan head. If she could manage to increase her courage without losing her heart, she could and would surpass every clan head to precede her. Now looking to Neji, he was symbolic of everything wrong with the Hyuga. He possessed a curse mark he resented, but just as much as he resented the mark, he resented Hinata due to being forced into her servitude. It was Minato's hope that Hinata and Neji could learn to get along, and if they did, he believed that there was a chance that they could, together, learn from each other and reform the Hyuga clan from the inside out. As he continued to gaze around the room, he then noticed Sasuke Uchiha. Sasuke was the legacy of a fallen clan, and as emotionally scarred as he was proud. Never upon his face had there ever lighted a smile. At least, not in his presence. Minato had never expected Itachi to do what he did. Itachi was so sweet, and a pacifist to boot. The shinobi life had never been the life for him. Minato had always felt that Itachi had the soul of an artist, like a painter, a sculptor, or anything else that one could do to display the beauty of life. But war and its influence, as well as societal and familial pressures, had forced him into the life of a shinobi, and from what Hiruzen had told him, he was damn good at it. Hiruzen had said that Itachi had done it for his village, under bad orders given to him from Danzo Shimura. Even still, he hadn't guessed that Itachi would be capable of it, whether through coercion or not. And now Minato watched this unfold before his eyes, the fallout of Konoha's inability to protect itself from itself. Minato felt that he bore some level of responsibility. These seedlings of revolt were already planted by the time he died, and he knew they would only grow. But he foolishly ignored it, thinking he had more time, and now an entire clan had ceased to be. The worst part of this was that he saw that Sasuke was suffering, and Minato had the information required to alleviate this. Sasuke was consumed by rage and revenge, and to know that Konoha had lied on his brother might push him over the edge. But the truth was something that always came out, no matter how much you hated it, and Konoha was going to have to pay the piper. Minato would need to talk to Hiruzen about it. As the school day came to an end, Minato would take off and go to the job he had at Yamanaka Flowers. Nobody knew that Minato was still alive, and this was for the best. The only person who knew was Hiruzen, and this was by Minato's request. Making for his job, he was welcomed in by Inoichi and his wife. Minato greeted them and grabbed an apron. He went to work, pruning the flowers, sweeping the shop, and changing the water in the vases. In doing so, he would earn a little bit of money. This money he would use to help himself stand instead of requiring the hard-earned cash of the village's citizens. That, and it also gave him a little extra to use whenever he wanted to. And trust me, there were times when he wanted to go out with friends and enjoy life. Despite his memories, he was still a child in body, and that formerly inner, currently outer child got dopamine rushes from all sorts of things that Minato originally wouldn't be caught dead doing. This included playing at the arcade, and every once in a while procuring some action figures to, as he put it, change position with dialogue. This was what he told Hiruzen at least, but the truth of the matter was his body wished to experience childhood. His mind was tempted to allow it, and knowledge that he was currently hijacking the body of the son he had lost, he could do nothing more than try to live the fullest life possible in Naruto's name. But letting Minato's own value increase through life experiences, it would be squared upon Naruto, whose life he hoped would have felt worth it when Minato finally got the chance to meet him in the afterlife. "Good work, Naruto," Inoichi called out. "Your cuts are exceptional. Are you sure you've never done this before?" he asked with a laugh. Minato laughed. "Maybe in a past life." They continued to chortle at this joke that wasn't really a joke for a good few seconds more. That was when Inoichi pulled out a bouquet. "We actually have an order to deliver. A bouquet has been ordered for Miss Kaya at the Obito Foundation's Golden Leaf Retirement Home. Would you mind delivering it for us?" Minato was taken off guard for a moment, but then nodded. Sure. He took the bouquet and made his way out. He wasn't gonna lie, he had not heard about the Obito Foundation, though he had seen the Golden Leaf before. The retirement home had been built in recent years for elderly folk where they could be taken care of. The foundation had been formed in Obito's name after the death of his grandmother. Who formed it remained a mystery, but Minato knew that it fit well. Obito was a kind boy at heart, and in the end it was that kindness that had gotten him killed. It was one of the biggest regrets that Minato had. He wished that he had been there with them, or had not left them that mission to do alone at all. Kakashi obviously wasn't ready, and even though he recovered quickly, it could not undo the damage done, and Obito paid the price. Not that Minato blamed Kakashi. Chances were Rin would have been captured anyway, and it had happened still. Rin was also a casualty of the war. And with his own death, Kakashi was now alone. Minato walked into the retirement home and up to the front desk. "I have a bouquet delivery for Miss Kaya. Is she here?" The nurse smiled. "She's in room 11. He then made his way to room 11. He stopped there and knocked 3 times. When there wasn't a response, he knocked again 3 times. "Delivery!" A voice from within called to him. "Come in." Minato stepped inside and closed the door behind him. "Greetings, Miss Kaya. I'm Naruto Uzumaki from Yamanaka Flowers. You have a bouquet." The elderly woman was confined to a bed. "I have a vase here on the bedside table." Minato walked over to the vase and placed the flowers in. He then went and got a glass of water and poured it in. As he did, he saw an old photograph of a younger woman and what he assumed to be her husband. Considering she was alone now, chances were that he passed away. "Thank you, Sonny," she said to him with a smile. He smiled back. "It's my pleasure." He looked around and saw that the room was slightly dirty. "Do you live alone, Miss Kaya?" She looked around. "Sadly, yes. My husband passed away about 4 years ago." Minato went and grabbed a broom and began to sweep up. "You don't have to do that, dear." Minato smiled. "No, it's my pleasure." He assumed that the retirement home was either understaffed or possibly lazy, and he didn't want to leave the kind woman in such a state. "Do they take care of you well here?" he asked. "They do. They don't like to sweep, but they certainly do make sure we're at least comfortable." "I'm glad," Minato said. He sort of lost track of time doing this, as the kind woman would tell him stories of the past. Eventually, Minato realized that he'd been here for over an hour. He finished sweeping. The kind woman would bid him over and offer him a kiss on the cheek for his efforts. Minato, in turn, would kiss her hand. "I'll see you very soon, Miss Kaya." She would laugh. "Take care, young Naruto." Minato would rush back to Yamanaka Flowers. He was expecting to be chewed out for being late and dilly-dallying. However, when he got back, he was surprised to find that this couldn't be further from the truth. Inoichi would call him over to tell him that he had just gotten a call from the delivery recipient complimenting Minato's work. Inoichi would ruffle Minato's hair and tell him that it was the heart and kindness that came with Yamanaka Flowers that made their work top-notch. He told Minato that his kindness and need to serve showed a love for the village that any shinobi should possess. Inoichi foresaw Minato becoming a great shinobi one day. Minato would smile, thinking that he had already been a pretty good one, but now it was time to make his son a good shinobi as well. After work, he would head home where he'd meet up with Hiruzen. "How are things, Minato?" Hiruzen would ask as the two shared dinner. "Things are going by pretty well. School's a breeze, and it's nice to see the village has grown past the wars we all waged not more than a few years back." Hiruzen would take a sip of tea. "Tensions rise, but it is a time of peace and profit indeed." Minato would sit there and think a moment. "Can we talk about something?" Hiruzen would look up at his young successor. "What is it, Minato?" Minato seemed deep in thought as his gaze stared through the carpet beside their table. "Itachi received bad orders from Konoha's leadership, yes? And that's why he did what he did, right?" Hiruzen nodded. "Yes. What about it?" Minato looked up at Hiruzen. "Why don't we explain this to Sasuke? He deserves to know. And what good would it do Sasuke? It would only cause him to resent Konoha." "Because it's the right thing to do," Minato said. "The truth always comes out. A shinobi keeps secrets, that's true, but he should not keep secrets from those he loves, nor should he keep any secrets that he's not willing to deal with if they get out. You must understand, Minato. If word of this got out, it would be a scandal. But it is a scandal, Hiruzen, and it's one that I feel will be told." "How so?" Hiruzen asked. "You and I both know Itachi, and we both knew the Uchiha clan. There's no way that Itachi alone could do what he did. I know he now has that Mangekyo thing, but it just doesn't add up. The mission was completed abnormally fast. I read the files on it. There's no way that even with a Mangekyo that Itachi had the ability to sweep the entire clan that quickly. He would have had to kill an Uchiha every 5 seconds, and that doesn't even count travel time. Someone else was involved, but we don't know who. The truth is already leaked." Hiruzen thought about it. "But the means of telling Sasuke could see the entire leadership of the Hidden Leaf called into question. The other clans could wish to rebel.
There's no telling what could happen.
Minato nodded.
But it's true that this truth is hurting Sasuke. Even if he knew, he would want justice, and that would expose it to the world. What are we supposed to do? Hiruzen asked. Simple. Throw Danzo under the bus.
Hiruzen was shocked. What? Minato poured himself more tea and continued his meal.
This was his screw up. He should take the fall for it. Expose his deeds and what he's done, and then put him on trial for his actions. You and I both know that what he did was a gross misuse of power, and equivalent to treason. Whether there was going to be a rebellion or not, he ordered a military strike on Konoha citizens off the books, with the stipulation that not even women and children could survive. That's war crime levels of bad, Hiruzen. You can do as you want, but I'm just saying, if it were me, I'd grow a pair and nail Danzo to the wall. But what do I know?
Hiruzen began to think.
Do you have proof of his treason? Minato asked.
Hiruzen nodded.
I do, but the issue that remains is that Itachi is currently deep undercover. If word of his innocence comes out, his position may be compromised.
Minato nodded.
I see.
He thought about it.
Well, if we're going to use lies to protect the damned, we might as well use lies to protect the innocent. I say we find something else to nail Danzo to the wall over, then state that this is actually the reason why he's facing justice, but the truth of why will be just for us and Sasuke to know.
Hiruzen shook his head.
Danzo has too much power. If we do that, he'll bring Konoha down on us. He'll reveal everything. Danzo is not the kind you can cross. His loyalty to the village extends only so long as the village's loyalty to him does. He will expose everything. We're dealing with deep corruption that I should have removed a long time ago. That is now so deeply seated that there's no hope of removing him without the village taking a hit.
Minato took a deep breath and sighed.
You're really gonna make me say it, aren't you?
Hiruzen looked up.
Pardon?
Minato sat back and rolled his head on his neck, letting it crack.
We could remove him from the equation, the same way that he removed the Uchiha.
Hiruzen was mortified.
Do you mean you want me to assassinate my own subordinate? Isn't that evil? Doesn't that go against what you've told me before about the truth coming out eventually? Assassination would only dig us deeper.
Minato nodded.
You're right, I'm sorry. I suppose it shows that as a Hokage, I'm still slightly immature.
Hiruzen shook his head.
Your heart is in the right place, Minato. You're right, we need to do something about it. But what we can do is limited. I'm not sure what we're supposed to do. Do you think Sasuke's loyal to Konoha? Truly?
What do you mean? Hiruzen asked.
What I mean is, what if we explained this whole situation to him now? Surely he'd understand. The only reason why we can't expose Danzo is because Itachi's life would be in danger. If we framed it that way, we could pin his hatred on Danzo, explaining why we can't bring him to justice.
Hiruzen listened to what Minato was saying.
Do you think he would go for that?
Minato nodded.
I think he would. He deserves to know. If we let him travel down this path of hatred, it will consume him. And should the truth come out in the wrong way, it would destroy him.
Hiruzen nodded.
You're right. I need to talk to Sasuke about this. Just tell him the honest truth.
After dinner, Hiruzen would leave the home. He was going to go back to the Hokage's office and begin preparing to find a way to tell Sasuke the truth. Minato would stop by every so often to help him formulate his plan. And eventually, Hiruzen told Sasuke. Sasuke's reaction was at first surprise, then confusion, and as predicted, his hatred moved from Itachi to Danzo. But Sasuke's love for Itachi stabilized the situation by informing Sasuke that to seek justice at an inopportune time could result in Itachi getting hurt. Despite this, Hiruzen sensed in Sasuke the desire to have Danzo killed. This was something he told to Minato on one of the occasions of their talks. Minato would sigh and think about it.
What we need to do is assure Sasuke that justice will come, just not right now, and that he shouldn't throw his life away to achieve something that will come in due time.
Hiruzen agreed with this, and it seemed as though Sasuke settled in. But this world-altering information left Sasuke with a lot to digest, so he was excused from the academy for a couple of weeks. But time would eventually pass, and the time to graduate would come. Minato, of course, passed with flying colors, as did Sasuke and the rest of the class. That night, Minato and Hiruzen would celebrate. Hiruzen would decide to allow Minato to choose his team. Minato would look through the candidates and choose Sakura Haruno and Sasuke Uchiha. But furthermore, he requested that his team be placed under Kakashi Hatake. Minato was interested to see how his former student had grown. Hiruzen would agree to this and allow the custom-made team to become a reality. And as the day came that they would meet, Team 7 would be born, unofficially, but born nonetheless. They would go to introduce themselves to each other, and as Minato got to go first, he went with the most cliched dream of them all, and that was to be Hokage. It only made sense, as he'd been the 4th before, and he wished to be Hokage again. But tacking on top of that, he stated that above all else, he wanted to see how the village could grow and prosper, and how this generation and the generations to come would build upon the former and excel to new heights. This dream left Kakashi staring at him. Never took you for a sentimentalist, Naruto, but I guess there's a first for everything. He then turned to Sakura, and of course Sakura hadn't changed. She, like every other girl in the class, had the hots for the 3 days grace ninja reject, and she made it painfully clear that everything in her future was set upon him. Sasuke, on the other hand, was mostly silent when his turn came. He knew that he couldn't just blurt out everything and anything. He couldn't be truthful about his dream, so he went with something vague. To bring back my clan and find justice for them. Kakashi, of course, hilariously offered no information, and treated this whole meet and greet as a test that everyone failed. This left Minato laughing, as Kakashi was more than he ever thought he could be. Not only was he wise and no longer as depressed as he had been, he was also quite laid back and even funny. Then, without further explanation, Kakashi stood and led the 3 of them out to a training area. Minato was excited to see what Kakashi had planned. It was then that Kakashi pulled out the bells. Minato almost cried for joy that his student had remembered them and the meaning behind it, and was trying to teach this to the next generation. Despite holding back his tears, he could not hold back his smile. Kakashi thought he seemed quite strange for that, but all the same they continued. Minato was getting fired up to try and get those bells, but remembering who he was, what he could do, and what the others could and would need, he knew that he'd have to hold back and make an ass out of himself a little to see whether his team was going to be able to handle the pressure of forming an alliance on their own. If not, he could urge them to do so together, but all in all, it was up to them to truly decide whether or not they actually wanted to do this. And so Kakashi finished explaining what the bell test was for and told them to come at him. So the group would rush into battle against their mentor to try and take the bells. Minato was first in, attempting to take it. He was sure to signal to Kakashi that he should expect that Minato's potential was higher than the average student. He did this in the hopes that if he ever needed to go full Yondaime Hokage on someone's ass, then they wouldn't be completely shocked. This, of course, did slightly catch Kakashi off guard, who had to divert full attention away from his book and to Minato, who he then subjected to 1,000 years of death, which sent Minato straight into the nearby lake. Minato came out of the water less than thrilled with that technique. It's a good thing I know Kakashi, or else I'd friggin' crush him for that. He came out of the water and shook off like a dog before rushing back into battle. He let Sasuke have his moment. Minato stopped long enough to watch Sasuke and found his potential to be higher than the average shinobi as well. He was pleased with this, but Kakashi was not. Kakashi had noticed Minato stop rushing in when he saw Sasuke and took it as Minato letting Sasuke have a turn before taking one of his own. This led Kakashi to believe that the group was not sincerely attempting to make the team work and decided to up the game by forcing it into the deeper area of the woods. Minato and the others followed after. It was then that Sasuke declared that they should split up. Are you so sure that's a good idea? Minato asked. Of course it is, dumbass. We cover more ground that way and have a better chance of taking him off guard. Minato sighed. Okay, fine. And so the 3 of them would split up. Minato went his own way. Of course, he would cheat with Sage Mode and simply sense where Kakashi was, but he found that this would be too easy and wasn't enough fun. So he decided to do it the old-fashioned way and attempt to track him. He looked for Kakashi signs everywhere he went. That was footprints, crushed leaves, and broken branches. He knew he had taught his apprentice not to leave these tracks behind, but for Kakashi to be able to adequately test his charges, he would need to hold back just as much as Minato was, so he knew that he could follow these signs. More than likely, this would lead to a trap, because the point of this wasn't to defeat Kakashi, but to utilize teamwork to impress him. But all the same, Minato attempted to fall into the traps. This was, after all, Minato testing Kakashi as much as Kakashi was testing Minato. And as he did so, he found himself hanging from a tree by his foot. A classic trap, one Minato hadn't fallen into for a long time. Even though he knew it was there, he was in a jovial mood and wanted to feel the blood rush to his head. That being said, he was easily taken by the trap. As he hung there by his foot, all he could do was smile, much to Kakashi's discomfort. You really are a kooky one, Naruto. He would rush off into the forest to lay the next trap. Minato would hang there for a time to give Kakashi a head start. He would then cut himself down and land upright like a cat. He rushed off after Kakashi. Finding the site of the second trap, he found that it was not set for him, but instead for Sakura, who had apparently fallen for some very obvious genjutsu. Kakashi was just playing games with them at this point. This wasn't even a Sharingan genjutsu. This was just standard that anyone could learn. Minato would then raise his fingers. Release! Despite having released the genjutsu, she didn't wake up. Minato smiled and shook his head. Must have hit you with something horrible, he said. He looked around.
"Oh, hey Sasuke," he said to nothing. "What's that? You're feeling hot? Yeah, go ahead, take off your shirt. You're among friends." Suddenly Sakura shot up. "Yeah, you're among friends." She looked around. "Sasuke?" She turned back and saw Minato rolling on the ground laughing. She was sure to punish him for that one, but together the two continued. Minato with one more lump on his head than before. They would make their way deeper into the woods where they would find the third trap, this time having caught Sasuke. He'd been buried in earth all the way up to his neck. This caused Sakura to faint once again, believing that she had found Sasuke's severed head. Minato simply stepped over here and walked up to Sasuke. He held out his hand and used Earth Release to secretly loosen the dirt so Sasuke could get his arm out. He would pull him up out of the ground. Sasuke would dust himself off. "As much as I hate to admit it, I think Kakashi-sensei is too much for us alone," he said. This was exactly what Minato was hoping to hear. This meant that Sasuke was open to teamwork. Looking back at Sakura, he knew that she'd be up for anything that Sasuke was, so when they woke her up, they began developing a plan. They finally tracked Kakashi down again, simply waiting in a large opening, leaning against a tree, whistling slightly loudly as if drawing attention to himself. The three of them got into position. Sasuke would step out into the open. "Kakashi," he shouted, "I've come for the bells." Kakashi would sigh. "You never learn, do you?" "Maybe he does," Minato shouted as he and a shadow clone grabbed his arms from behind. They locked legs together to form a strong chain and used their chakra to provide themselves strength. Kakashi was caught. Sasuke would then launch a fireball jutsu. Kakashi, unable to break free, would channel lightning release to turn himself into an electric battery that would shock Minato. He would then attempt to jump out of the way. Sakura would jump out of the treetop as Kakashi passed by, knowing that there was nowhere for him to go up there. She gripped onto his hips as tightly as possible and fell to the ground with him, sabotaging his ability to catch himself. As soon as he fell, Minato and his clones dogpiled on him while Sasuke grabbed the bells. Having grabbed the bells, the three of them celebrated their victory over their mentor. Kakashi sat up and scratched the back of his head. That was a very good plan, gang. In truth, it was a good plan, but it only worked because Kakashi wasn't trying and because he left himself open. Minato knew this, but he was still proud of his team all the same. But now comes the hard part. "Which two of you are going to become my students and who's going back to the academy?" Kakashi asked. Each of them looked at each other. Minato knew this was a game, and even if it wasn't, he had seen how well Kakashi had grown and was willing to give up his place for the others. Sasuke was confident enough in himself that he felt he could make it with any teacher, so he also would pass it up. Sakura was so adamant about doing everything with Sasuke that she was willing to give up even her own chances at becoming a shinobi. So in the end, all three volunteered to go back to the academy. This impressed Kakashi enough to let them all stay on. And so, here and now, finally, officially, Team 7, aka Team Kakashi, was born, and Minato could not be happier. The days at work in Team 7 were almost lazy days, nothing more than a few chores and a few errands. It was a cakewalk compared to the other stuff Minato had to do back when he was originally a genin. Back then, during the Third Shinobi World War, genin's jobs were a lot more dangerous. While he hadn't exactly been put on the battlefield until he was a chunin, genin still had dangerous missions of their own, such as delivering supplies to the front lines, and there had been times where such genin had been killed by the enemy, attempting to stop them from delivering their packages to the needy shinobi of the front lines. These days though, genin had smaller jobs, easily done within the village, nothing more than basic sanitation services and neighborhood watch. There wasn't much that they had to do. It was nice to be able to do easy things compared to the past, but it did get a little repetitive, and Minato was afraid it would result in weaker shinobi who believed that what it meant to be a warrior is picking up after a dog. At home that night, he was reading through some books, anything he could find on the Shinigami and the Reaper Death Seal. It wouldn't be much longer thereafter that Hiruzen would show up with even more books. Each of these are the personal journals and diaries of Kushina, as well as the ones of Lady Mito. If any book can tell us how the Reaper Death Seal can be undone, it must be these. Hiruzen put them down on the table nearby. He then sat down. Minato was looking through various ritual books. I came across this entry on the Reaper Death Seal in this book about Fuinjutsu, and it mentions a mask of sorts. I cross-referenced it with other books, and they all mention the existence of a mask, but how it works and where to find it remains a mystery, Minato said. Well, maybe these diaries can help us figure that out, Hiruzen replied. Minato nodded. He began looking through them. By the way, I wanted to ask you, are there any other missions you can give Team 7? Hiruzen seemed a little confused. What do you mean? Minato flipped the page of a book, not turning his attention away from it for even a moment. You know, a new mission. Something a little more exciting, possibly dangerous.
Even if only slightly, I don't want my team getting too soft. Back during our times as Genin, wars were breaking out and happening left and right. This generation has never even seen a war, let alone felt the effects of it. And I'm worried that it's gonna grow soft, feeling that what it means to be a shinobi is garbage duty. So if possible, can we get a few more dangerous missions? Hiruzen thought about it. I'll look through what I have when I get back to the office. Thanks, Minato said as he continued studying the diaries. The day after, the entire team reported for duty to the Hokage. Hiruzen had been looking through his various different mission requests for one that was more dangerous, but still fell under the purview of Genin. This mission he settled on was the mission that would later become known as the Land of Waves mission. This was to protect a certain bridge worker known as Tazuna. This mission was offered to Minato and the rest of Team 7, which of course Kakashi was skeptical of due to the possible dangers, and his team not yet having proven themselves. But Minato turned around. Come on Kakashi, live a little, it'll be fun. Kakashi thought about it. Alright, fine, but if danger appears, you get behind me. Minato smiled. He then looked back at Hiruzen. Hiruzen would offer his stamp of approval. Take today to prepare. Tomorrow you set out at dawn. The quartet would go out to celebrate their new mission together and get something special to eat before going their own way. Minato, of course, having pulled from his previous experience, always had a bug-out bag ready for this. A bag with enough supplies to last him, so there was little he had to do to prepare. Just take the bag and go. All the same, having learned from Kushina, he did take everything out of the bag to check and make sure it was all there. And it was a good thing he did, as he almost forgot to pack toilet paper, which he assumed he would need. With that out of the way, he enjoyed his free day and used it to study more on the location of this mask. He happened to find a passage that seemed to mark the location of the mask in Mito's personal journal. But unable to take the time to go there yet, he simply put a bookmark in the journal and left himself a sticky note. That night, as Minato slept, he would dream sweetly of himself and Kushina. He saw her sitting in a chair a few good months through pregnancy. She was already showing. Feeling his heart soar with contentment and love, he was sure that if paradise could exist on Earth, this was it. He walked over next to her and knelt down to feel the baby growing in her womb. He pressed his ear against it to listen. His Kushina and Naruto, the two people whose lives he cherished most. Such a sweet dream. Too bad it couldn't last. Suddenly the memory shifted. He saw Kushina crying out on the table as he attempted to keep the seal closed. He saw the masked man holding his son, and he saw the Ninetales escape. He felt the hollow terror in his heart as he saw the beast pulled out of his wife. Only a thread of hope that their life might continue into normalcy by knowing that her incredible Uzumaki spirit was keeping her alive. But when he heard her cry out that Naruto wasn't breathing, it felt as if his heart were rent in two. Or perhaps it was. He looked down and saw the claw passing through his chest. His spine shattered. It was a miracle that his legs were still responding to commands. Maybe they were thinking on their own. His body did have a tendency to do that. But as if having an out-of-body experience, he hovered above, seeing his own body, the body of Kushina, and the body of Naruto all lying motionless as the Ninetales rampaged in the background. Suddenly, Minato cried out as he sat up, sweat pouring down his face, his bed damp with perspiration. He realized he was alone, only the hollow shell of his son serving as a reminder of what he had lost. A zombie. That's all he was, a zombie. A disembodied spirit of a dead man possessing the body of a dead child. He wanted so badly to be comforted by Kushina. His legs closed tightly, his arms wrapping around his torso as if he were having a stomachache of a lifetime. But in actuality, it was his own vulnerability causing pain right now. The Hokage, the strongest ninja in all the Land of Fire, perhaps the world, was still unable to save what he had lost. Hoping somehow that his wife might wrap her arms around him like she always had, like a mother would go to her crying child, yet no such comforts came. Minato was alone. The room seemed so dark. It felt as if it couldn't get any darker. The clock was the only illumination besides the faint glow of a nightlight in the bathroom. The time was 3 a.m. Some considered this the witching hour. The hour when the veil between the here and there was thinnest, where the dead and haunting memories of things long last tended to creep up. And whether this was just superstition or fact, Minato did not know, but in a way he wished that he could conjure up the spirits of his wife and son, even if they were vengeful. He would rather face their wrath than live in their absence. Turning on the light, he got out of bed, walking about. In all his years serving as a shinobi of Konoha through the wars, his PTSD had always been an issue. It was always something Kushina could help him walk through. People saw him as this god among shinobi, this undefeatable man, but there were nights that he woke up in a panic attack, feeling like he was back on the battlefield. Even though he smiled, confidently striding toward his enemy, acting as if he were fearless, none of this was true. That was just the shinobi way. Deep down, he was tortured by his actions, but even worse by his inactions. There was no pain worse. It hurt to kill another person, but what hurt more was knowing that you could save someone and then failing to do so, and right now that pain was eating, gnawing away at his soul. Life was becoming more of a pain. Every day he looked in the mirror, he was faced with a life's long failure, and it was so hard. He walked into the kitchen's darkness. Not hungry, he just needed to expend the energy he had. He needed to feel like he was doing something, so he was patrolling his home, making sure it was secure as a fortress. As he was considering returning to bed to try and force himself back to sleep, something he feared he might never accomplish, he stopped by the table. He lifted from its surface a book embroidered with the name Kushina on it. He kept it close and walked back to bed with it. Closing his door for privacy from the darkness, he crawled back into bed, having let it air out. Leaving the lamp beside his bed on, he laid back and flipped into it at a random area. June 4th. Dear Diary, it's getting harder to do my everyday chores. My little Naruto is growing so big and strong. It makes me so proud of him. Even though the extra weight is making my life a little harder, I consider it nothing but training for the next stage of my life, ascended beyond wife to mother. Nothing makes me more excited than to know I've done something positive for this world. Through love and the union of two spirits, a new life is brought into the world. My baby Naruto. Every day Minato goes to work and gives us both a kiss goodbye, but I know he's nervous. This must be the most nerve-wracking thing in his life, which is a surprise to be sure. He's seen wars, he's seen crises on a geopolitical scale, and yet it's only when in bed talking about our future as father and mother do I feel him tremble. It's almost adorable. It makes me wish I could take all his troubles upon myself. I've told him not to worry about the hard stuff, and that I'll learn how to care for our child while he worries about the bigger stuff, but his need to be honorable and dependable has caused him to skip out on non-essential meetings to attend a parenting class with me. He's trying so hard, and I love him so much. My Minato, you're my life. If ever I could give anything just to help you smile, I would. You are my life, my love, and my shining star. I love you. The entry ended, and so too had Minato's ability to control his emotions. Tears ran down his cheeks as he clutched the book in his arms. He hugged it as if it were the most precious love letter he had ever held. He fell asleep with this book lovingly tucked into his embrace. He had found the last item he needed to bring with him on his mission. The morning after Minato woke up, he felt a bit more rested than he thought he would be. He got up, grabbed breakfast, and set about his early morning personal grooming to ensure that he was presentable to his charge. When he got to the gate, he found himself being presentable, but the bridge master being quite the opposite. The client was tired, halfway drunken, and smelled of sweat and vomit. Minato tried not to judge the man, but it seemed obvious that the man gave zero craps about what anyone thought about him, which was okay, cause Minato couldn't help but make a face that indicated that this man was indeed putrid. That must have been a leftover reaction from Naruto. This body had slightly altered Minato's behavior, to which he realized. The human body truly was itself a living thing, and drew the distinction between the soul and spirit. The breath of life was within this body, and because of that, it seemed to have a will of its own, and its reaction was now one of disgust. But he managed to suppress any further reactions from it, and so they began to move down the road, everything going as it should be. That was until they came across a puddle. He stopped. Kakashi looked to Naruto. What is it, Naruto? Do you see something? Minato nodded slowly. There's a puddle in the road. And? Kakashi asked, knowing where this was going. Minato blinked once, not looking away from the puddle for a moment. It hasn't rained in weeks. Suddenly from the puddle, two figures emerged. Muscle memory taking over, Minato utilized the Shadow Clone Jutsu to make another half of himself, each one holding both a kunai and a Rasengan. This surprised Kakashi. Where did you learn that? Minato suddenly jumped into action. With the kunai, he blocked the chained gauntlets these mercenary brothers used, and he shoved the Rasengan into each of their chests, completely knocking them back. As they hit the ground, he did as well. The entire group was surprised. What was that? Sakura asked. Minato looked back. Just reflexes? Kakashi knew that what he had just done was an A-rank ninjutsu, something he shouldn't be able to do at this point without a teacher. Rasengan wasn't just something you knew how to do. You needed to understand the basics of chakra control and chakra molding to even get started. You needed that along with volume and spin to be able to do what he had just done, and not only had Naruto done this, but he had done it twice with ease and without aid. He had done a perfect Rasengan and then stated it was reflexes. Even if it was reflexes, that only made this feat of power more impressive, as Naruto would have done it without even thinking. All the same, Kakashi did not press the matter. He was, after all, Minato's son. Maybe Minato had bequeathed to him some special scroll or something that Naruto pored over to complete this, but even then, it seemed questionable how it could be done. Well, I guess that's that, Kakashi said. They continued walking, and as they did, they came across Zabuza. During this impressive battle, Kakashi would find himself stuck in a water prison. Minato was surprised that his apprentice could be caught by such a technique. He understood Zabuza to be a member of the 7 ninja swordsmen of the mist, even if only formerly. But all the same, Kakashi normally had the potential to defeat such a villain. Minato assumed that Kakashi could not use his full strength because he was attempting to protect them, and this led to Kakashi being captured. "Our master was captured," Sasuke said darkly. Minato looked over at Sasuke and then back to Kakashi. "Yeah, but surely he can escape, right?" Minato waited for a moment and saw Kakashi grasp at his throat. "Dear heavens, he's drowning," Sakura said. Minato sighed. "All right, stand back. I'm going in with you," Sasuke said. Minato shook his head. "No, this needs speed and precision, just trust me." Sasuke seemed offended by the statement, but Minato's voice commanded respect that strangely Sasuke felt the need to give. Minato stepped forward towards Zabuza, grabbing his attention. "Are you gonna rescue your mentor, little Genin?" Minato shook his head. "No, I'm gonna rescue my student." He lifted his hands. Around each of his 5 fingers was a single kunai. Crossing his arms and then swinging them, he sent 10 shuriken flying. Most of them weren't even aimed at Zabuza. Zabuza was confused. "Such a horrible shot. You've wasted all your kunai." Naruto scoffed and shook his head. He then ran and dove into the water bubble, surprising Zabuza. "Well, now you're trapped with your master. You can both drown together." Minato gripped Kakashi and then raised 2 fingers to his face. Suddenly, they teleported out of the water to one of the kunai at random. Kakashi hit the ground coughing. Zabuza saw them. "Fool, you've left yourself open." He rushed to behead them both. Minato threw a kunai at Zabuza's head. Zabuza merely dodged it. Minato would suddenly teleport to the kunai with his flying Raijin Jutsu and would suddenly turn back and throw a volley of kunai at Zabuza. The swordsman managed to block them, only for Minato to reappear by the one Zabuza was standing over and planted a Rasengan right in his stomach, sending him flying into a tree. At this point, Sasuke and Sakura's jaws were on the ground. Even Kakashi was surprised by this. He picked up one of the kunai and noticed the sealing formula. It was the same as Minato's flying Raijin. This was impossible. There was no way that Naruto could do this. They didn't even teach this technique. He couldn't have possibly learned this by just reading it. Even Hashirama Senju, for all of his mastery, never had potential like this. Zabuza would then proceed to break glass in case of emergency and use Haku to get him out in a secretive fashion. Minato would then walk up to Kakashi and offer him a hand. Kakashi managed to stand, his eyes looking deeply into the eyes of the boy in front of him. "There's no way. Are you..." Suddenly, Kakashi doubled over. Minato caught him. "I've got you, Kakashi-sensei." Together, they'd retreat to Tazuna's home. There, they would let Kakashi rest. The day after, when he was able to get around with at least crutches, he took the team out to train, mostly Sakura and Sasuke, trying to teach them to get up to the treetops. Minato was going to do so as well until Kakashi stopped him. "No, you and me are gonna have a talk instead." He would pull Naruto somewhere where they could be alone. There, Kakashi sat him down. "It's time you told me the truth. Where did you learn to do these techniques?" Minato smiled. "I have a collection of journals at the house from my parents." Kakashi shook his head. "Stop lying to me, Minato." A chill ran down Minato's back. "What?" Kakashi sat forward. "There's no hiding from me. You're my master. Your abilities, your way of carrying yourself, talking, everything about you screams Minato. That's something more than genetics can provide, something more than a simple journal can teach. There's something fishy going on here. There's no way someone, even a high-potential Genin, can master the Rasengan and Flying Raijin without a teacher. Minato tried to teach this to his guards personally, and they couldn't even utilize it alone. They needed to work together to even do the jutsu like he could, and yet you can on your own. How are you sure that my potential is not just naturally above everything else you could ever expect in a student? Minato asked. Because I looked into your eyes. I'm not an idiot. I saw what lingers in your soul. Those are the same eyes looking back at me as they were the day Obito died. I see it all. The boy's head looked down toward the grass and he let out a sigh. Yeah, it's me, Kakashi. I should have known that if anyone could figure it out on their own, it would have been you. Kakashi sat there silently. Why did you hide it from me? Minato looked up. I wanted to see what this next generation could bring. That includes how you would teach them. I wanted to view your teachings through the eyes of my son so I could know that you were teaching them properly. You've gone above and beyond the call of duty. Kakashi shook his head. How is this possible? Kakashi asked. Minato began to recount the long story of how he had died protecting his wife and son from the Nine Tails, and how his son had died anyway, and how the shinobi sealed his soul into Naruto's body alongside the Nine Tails, and now Minato had a new lease on life as the boy named Naruto. An inherited life from one who was supposed to be heir to the Hokage. The story was so sad. So it was true, and Uchiha really did this? Minato shook his head. We can't be sure. Many Uchiha died during the Third Shinobi World War, and many Sharingan were pilfered. It could be anyone. There's no guarantee that it was an Uchiha. Kakashi sat back against the tree. I thought I had lost everyone. Minato walked over. I know exactly how you feel. He pulled out Kushina's journal. This is all I have left now of who I used to be, besides my own memories. I feel just as lonely. My hopes and dreams ripped away. I'm just a specter in this world, one that doesn't deserve to be here. If I could, the thing I'd want the most is for my son to have his body back and to have a chance at life. I should have died that day, not him. But alas, we play the cards we're dealt. They say there's no point in crying over spilled milk, but the people who've said that obviously have never spilled their milk. Kakashi sat there. Who else knows? Minato shook his head. Besides you and Hiruzen, nobody, and I plan to leave it that way. It's not like anyone would believe me if I told them anyway, so I don't want it to get in the way of my observing the next generation. Kakashi sighed. So I guess you took it easy on me during the bell test, huh? Minato laughed. Not as much as you took it easy on us. Remember, I'm trying to be an observer, not trying to destroy this next generation's chances at growth. Then tell me, is your dream of being Hokage again actually real? Minato thought about it for a moment. Well, I would obviously love to be Hokage again, but I'm not planning to steal the chance away from anyone else. Once I hit Jonin, all bets are off. Yondaime is coming back in full force. Kakashi understood. That seems fair, but honestly, I don't see why I shouldn't just promote you to Chunin and get it over with. Because that wouldn't be fair to Sakura and Sasuke. They need to learn as well. Kakashi shook his head. Sasuke displays potential like a Chunin already, and I'd take Sakura to be a healer. She would make a good Chunin as well if she could get over her obsession with Sasuke. Minato looked down. I won't question your decisions as a mentor, but the reason why I didn't tell you was so that I could experience being a Genin again without being treated any differently. I'm still hoping that I can. Kakashi scoffed. After the stunt you pulled yesterday against Zabuza, you should count yourself lucky I don't send you straight to Jonin. Regardless of your past life, you pulled off A rank and S rank jutsu without breaking a sweat. That's Jonin status. Anyone else who didn't know who you were would be already trying to have you sign up to the Anbu. Minato smiled. So I guess if it gets ruined, I'll have no one else to blame but myself. Oh well, I suppose I can still observe as a Chunin. The two laughed. Well, anyway, I need to get back to the house. Keep an eye on the others. Give them pointers if you can. Minato nodded. The two would go their separate ways. Sakura was already practically perfect at this technique. Her boon seemed to be her chakra control. Minato assumed it would be easy to teach her the Rasengan when the time came. Sasuke, on the other hand, had less control. Instead, he displayed too much chakra, likely due to deep-seated aggression. He would try to coach Sasuke on it, who almost seemed offended. But when Minato displayed his own ability to even stand upside down like a bat, Sasuke had no choice but to do as told. Sasuke would eventually pick it up, and the trio would return to the house where they'd be treated to dinner, and an outburst by the child, Inari. For the most part, Minato attempted to disregard the boy's outburst, but when hearing about the tragic story of the boy's father, as well as the circumstances of that father's death, Minato couldn't help but feel bad for him. He tried to give the boy some space, but when dinner was over, he would go and find the boy outside, watching the moon. Minato would walk over and sit down next to him, with Inari electing to ignore him for the most part. Minato sat there, looking up at the moon. You know, the moon always gives me PTSD. Every time it's full, I'm taken back to a moment that changed my life forever. But I suppose I don't have to tell you about that. Seems to me like you're struggling with your own past. Inari turned to look at him with eyes full of venom. If Minato had maintained eye contact with the boy, he had no doubt that the stares would have burned his soul to cinders. Not that it's any of my business to know. You're right, it's not. Minato sat there silently for a time. It was Inari that broke the silence. Why are you even still here? You delivered my grandfather home, just get out of here. Minato shook his head. No, we're gonna stay as long as we need to. Stay as long as you need to? You mean you're gonna stand up to Gato? That's a fool's errand. Minato scoffed through a laugh. I wouldn't say that, kiddo. Gato's just a businessman with a bunch of 2-bit mercs at his beck and call. You know, that's what I hate about you shinobi. You all think you're heroes. Heroes don't actually exist, only fools. Minato, ever kind and loving, maintained his cool. Is that what you think, Inari? Was Kaiza a fool? Inari's face turned from anger to sorrow at the realization that he had called the man he loved most a fool.
Minato shook his head. No, I know you didn't mean it that way, and Kaiza does as well, so there's no need to feel bad. Inari looked down. Heroes are foolish though. Even my daddy. I loved him so much, but he was foolish for trying to stand against Gato because it got him killed. He's dead now, and that's because he was too foolish or prideful to know when to stop. If he had only given up trying to be a hero, he would still be with me here now. Are you so sure about that, Inari? Minato asked. He looked up at the moon. Let me tell you a story. There was once a man who had everything he could ever ask for. Wealth, status, and value among his peers. But the things he treasured the most were his wife and child. On the day of his son's birth, however, an evil man released into the night a terrible monster to destroy everything the man held dear. And so, knowing the danger he was in, what it could cost, the man decided to fight it anyway. The man, with every ounce of his strength, pushed back against the monster, but seeing it directing its attack toward his wife and child, he jumped in the way, taking the shot himself. The man's life ebbed away as his wife watched. In the end, because of this sacrifice, he was able to stop the beast from destroying everything, but it cost him his life. Many might call that man a hero, though he likely would have called himself a failure. Was he a failure? The boy asked. It depends on what you look at, but at the core of this person, he loved his family more than he loved his own life. And that's what being a hero is, Inari. Heroes oftentimes do die. In fact, in most cases, it's only after death that a person's called a hero. Inari was starting to cry. If that's the cost of being a hero, then why does everyone want to be one? Minato looked at the boy. Most people who understand the true cost of what it means to be a hero tend to not desire to be one. I don't want to be a hero, but I'm prepared to become one if I have to. You see, what makes a hero isn't the desire to become one, but the desire to be willing to trade your life for someone else. Being a hero is about more than a title. It's about more than pride. Most heroes tend to not even name themselves heroes. A hero isn't someone who swoops in and defeats the bad guys. A hero is the person who's willing to set their needs, even their life, aside for someone else. That's what makes a hero. Love. The love to give up one's life for someone else. So, from a more selfish point of view, yes, it is foolish to try and be a hero. But what it really boils down to is what you're willing to give up for the ones you love. It may seem foolish to try and give up your own life, but only if you esteem your own life's value above that of those you love. If you love others more than yourself, then to not sacrifice your life for them is a foolish mistake. Your father sacrificed his life for you. What this tells me is that he loved you and this village more than himself, and that's why he's a hero. Inari, you're not averted to heroes, you're lonely, because the same seed that existed within your father exists in you. You hate heroes because you would rather have suffered and died to keep your daddy alive. Inari, a hero is sleeping in you. You just don't understand it yet. To this, the boy's heart overflowed. He hugged onto Minato. Mr. Naruto, it hurts so much. Minato hugged the boy tightly. His own heart was beginning to bleed again. I know it does, Inari. I know it does. The two consoled each other in their loss and in their pain. As this took place, Tazuna couldn't help but watch. Who is that boy? He asked. He acts with such compassion, like an adult who understands the situation so perfectly. Kakashi stood there. He's a person who's seen much and experienced more. If anyone can relate to loss, it's him. And so the night came and went and the dawn broke. Kakashi, having finally recovered, would get ready to go with Tazuna to the bridge, and as he did, Naruto would join him. Before leaving though, Naruto stopped by Inari. He pulled out a kunai. I pray that the hero inside you never needs to use this, but if your inner hero needs to fight back, keep this kunai close. What if I'm not strong enough, Naruto? Inari asked. Minato smiled and ruffled the boy's hair. Then call out my name. So long as you have my kunai, I'll never be far away. Together, the group would leave for the bridge. Arriving there, almost everything passed by peacefully. Sakura was kicking back in a chair, halfway about ready to go to sleep. Sasuke was pacing back and forth. Kakashi was keeping an eye on the workers, and Minato was by the side of the bridge, looking out over the water, looking out for any incoming watercraft. It was then that he spotted a few vessels in the distance. Kakashi, he shouted, getting his student/master's attention. Kakashi looked over the side and saw it. It was at this time that Zabuza and Haku appeared. Zabuza would face off against Kakashi and would leave Haku to focus on Minato and the others. As the battle began, Haku had been instructed to cut Minato off from the others and attempted to kill him first. Minato would be caught in the demonic mirroring ice crystals technique. Seeing that he was stuck, he would attempt to throw his kunai out so that he might escape. However, his kunai would be struck down by Senbon. My master told me about your techniques. He told me that I should be careful of your teleportation. Space-time jutsu will not save you from my ultimate technique. Minato was impressed. Wow, such speed. To be able to focus in and knock my kunai out of the air. I would suppose you possess a Sharingan, would ya? He would ask. Haku would shake his head. I possess only one Kekai Genkai, and that's Ice Release. Minato nodded. Then your speed is truly a marvel for someone your age. I'm inclined to return the compliment, Haku stated. I suppose this battle will simply boil down to who's fastest. I can travel at the speed of light between my mirrors. And so this battle began. Haku was too fast for Minato to attack, and his ice mirrors would simply reform after being destroyed. But all the same, Haku could not strike Minato with his Senbon. Minato and Haku were left at a stalemate. All the while, Kakashi and Zabuza were clashing evenly with each other. This continued for a time until Gato's men showed up. From there, the battles ended. Gato, I have this. I don't need your interference, Zabuza said. The old businessman smirked. Perhaps so, but I don't like to leave anything up to chance. It was then that he displayed his two hostages, Tsunami and her son Inari. Inari stood there. Naruto, I couldn't do it. My hero isn't strong enough. It's okay, Inari. Do you still have my kunai? One of the two mercenaries holding the hostage held it up. What, do you mean this? He said, twirling it on his finger with a smug look on his face. Zabuza's eyes widened. You fool! Throw that thing away! Suddenly, Minato teleported to the kunai. He took it from the mercenary's hand and planted a foot in his jaw. He would punch the other holding Tsunami as hard as he could, freeing them. Run, he shouted as he put his hands together for multi-shadow clone jutsu. A multitude of shadow clones appeared behind them. Each clone began mercilessly beating through the mercenaries, all the while Kakashi and Zabuza's battle continued. Haku attempted to help his master, but Sasuke stepped in the way to stop him, his own Sharingan activating. No way, you're not getting past me, freak. As it turns out, Haku would indeed get past him, but only to serve as a sacrifice for Zabuza, taking the Chidori that was meant for him. Zabuza would attempt to strike down Kakashi anyway, but Minato's shadow clone would appear behind him and strike him with his kunai, killing him as well. With Gato and his men defeated, the bridge was protected. It would eventually reach completion, with the bridge coming to be named the Bridge of the Yellow Flash due to Naruto's speed. Minato would ruffle Inari's hair as they prepared to leave. Inari would look up at him with tears in his eyes. Thank you so much. Minato smiled. Keep that kunai close, Inari. Strengthen your body, as well as your heart, and become the man Kaiza believed you could be. And with that, the three would return home to Konoha. Minato stood under the shaded awning of a shop, sipping on a milkshake. This was one of the things he had always loved to do. There was a shop that was friendly to him, even when the rest of the village was not, and the kind people there, even though they too had been scarred by the Ninetales attack, would still smile when he came in. Minato knew that deep down there was resentment, but that was okay, because he also knew that deep down there was understanding, and the attempt to conquer their own pain, and Minato respected that. Whenever he had the chance to grace them with a visit, that's exactly what he would do. His money serving this small family, and in return getting a nice peanut butter milkshake to provide extra protein after a strenuous workout. His current body was a masterpiece. It took all the best traits that existed within Minato and mixed it with the wonderfully perfect traits of Kushina. Naruto was a liger of potential, and his youth mixed with his genetics left him predisposed to being strong. It made Minato so proud, though a deep sorrow often would overtake him, as no matter where he went, he felt like an alien invading the body of someone else. Imagine such a feeling, such an existential crisis, and it was one he lived in all day long. He was a ghost, an abomination, he felt, having taken the rightful body of his son, a parasite. But all the same, he questioned himself. If he could ask Naruto right now, the boy would likely tell his father to use the body and enjoy life. But was this really even Minato's life to enjoy? No, he pushed those thoughts from his head. Can't I even enjoy a milkshake without falling back into despair? Good grief. He smiled and sucked down the rest of this delicious milkshake. He would put the disposable cup into the trash receptacle and head back to his apartment. As he went to open the door, he noticed something. There was a chip in the door beside the deadbolt. By this time, Minato's key was already in the deadbolt, so now his position was exposed. No matter. If someone's inside, then they're relying on the element of surprise. Now that I know that they're there, they've lost their only advantage. And now that I know what they plan, the advantage is flipped. They'll be too predictable. He pushed open the door. Looking in, he didn't see anything. He pushed it further to see if the door would crush anyone possibly standing behind it, but there wasn't. Stepping in, he closed it behind him and locked it too, keeping his eyes forward, but his attention and sensory perception of chakra focused behind him at all times. Turning around, he walked forward into the kitchen and saw a kettle on the stove, which then began to whistle. Quite a peculiar assassin, Minato thought. Made himself right at home. He then heard a groan coming from behind a locked door, followed by the sound of a flushing toilet.
Goodness gracious, this must be a true professional. Minato decided to sit down on his couch as he waited. He heard the sink's water running before the extraordinarily loud creaking of the bathroom door opening. When the man stepped out, the wild hair and red Haori took Minato by surprise. "Jiraiya-sensei?" The old man looked over. "Well, if it isn't little Naruto. Surprised to see that you recognize me. Or maybe I'm not." "What's that supposed to mean?" Minato asked. "Well, let's just say a little jumping monkey told me that you're not what you seem. He didn't tell me why though, only that I'd find it interesting, and indeed I do. Who would have known that reincarnation was actually possible?" Minato sat there. "So you know then?" Jiraiya tapped the side of his noggin. "The Uchiha aren't the only ones who claim that their eyes see the truth." He walked over to the whistling pot of water. He lifted it off the stove's eye and poured it into a cup of ramen. He then folded down the lid of the paper cup and sat his chopsticks on top to let the noodles finish cooking. He turned around. "So I bet you're wondering why I'm here." "Oh, so it's not just a kind visit?" Minato asked. Jiraiya shook his head. "It's because I was told that you were the opportunity of a lifetime for Konoha. The wisdom of one of the greatest shinobi to ever live, placed inside of a body so strong that your power hasn't dampened a bit, only growing daily. Now that sounds like the chance of a lifetime if you ask me, but what's more is you have the Nine Tails sealed inside of you. Your potential could turn you into more than just the strongest shinobi in the world, but the strongest shinobi in history. You might even set a record that no shinobi could ever live up to, and I just couldn't help but try and stamp my name onto that achievement somehow. You're my greatest legacy after all." Minato smiled. "I think you overblow my potential." "Au contraire, my student. I think you underestimate yourself as well as the Nine Tails. I've been sent to instruct you on how to deal with this, so be ready to do a little training." Minato leaned his head back. "I just got back from a mission earlier today and I already did a workout. Can I at least have a day off?" Now currently eating from the cup, Jiraiya spoke, his noodles whipping the air, giving new sound to the words passing between his lips. "Why put off until tomorrow the things you can do today?" "Because today sucks," Minato said flatly. Jiraiya sighed and smiled at his apprentice's wit. "Well, if it helps any, the kind of training we're gonna do will not be training you physically, but mentally. So you don't have to worry about pulling a muscle or overworking yourself. Connecting with the Nine Tails is what's important. Have you been in your own psyche with it yet?" "Of course, it's how I unlocked the memories of my past." Jiraiya nodded. "Then you're halfway there. Next is getting chakra from your beast." "I don't think that's gonna work," Minato said. "Kushina has already stated that he hates my guts and wishes me dead, so I don't think me asking him pretty please with a cherry on top is gonna do too much." "Who said the beast had to cooperate?" Minato was confused. "Wait, what?" Jiraiya smiled. "If he won't give you his chakra freely, you just gotta take it from him. That might require an alteration to your seal, however, and it also might require you to face the beast in combat. But you don't have to worry about doing that today. That'll come later. Right now, I just want you to close your eyes and probe around. Don't even bother talking with the Nine Tails if you don't think it'll cooperate. Just walk around and test out your capabilities in there. See if your chakra holds out. See if you're as strong in there as you are outside." Minato would do as commanded, and found that his power was all the same whether he was in his psyche or not. Jiraiya would pat him on the back. "If you really want to have a chance at smoking the beast, consider using Sage Mode. This technique will be perfect for the battle as it means you can continually rebuild your spent chakra as you fight." "But wait, if I'm fighting, I'll be moving, and if I'm moving, I can't build up Sage Mode." Jiraiya shook his head. "You misunderstand. Just because you're fighting in your head doesn't mean you're moving. The real you that's utilizing Sage Mode will be sitting still. The you in your mind will be reaping the benefits. Trust me, the battle will be far easier than it was 11 years ago, and once you have the Nine Tails power at your disposal, you'll basically be unstoppable." Minato thought about it. That sounds good. And so the next day, Minato and Jiraiya met outside the village in a place of safety. "I won't be able to help you fight. I'd mostly just get in the way if I tried, and at least I'm honest enough to admit that. What I can do, however, is keep this seal nearby." Jiraiya pulled out a piece of paper with a seal on it. "The moment things go awry, I activate this and shut the beast and pull you out. So be careful." Minato nodded. Minato opened the jacket he wore to expose the seal and laid back before Jiraiya so that his master could prepare for the battle. "Let me know if you need to apply the seal." Minato nodded. He closed his eyes and entered his subconscious. There he stepped up to the gate. Jiraiya knelt there over his apprentice. He suddenly saw the seal markings appear. Looking up to his student's face, he saw the coloration forming around his eyes, signifying he was now in Sage Mode. Within his subconscious, Minato was doing a few warm-ups. It was strange to think he might pull a muscle in his mind, but perhaps he was also trying to psych himself up for it. He bounced on his tippy toes as if he were jumping an invisible rope. He rolled his neck and shoulders and attempted to pop any joints he could to ensure that nothing caught. "Focus, focus," he said to himself as he continued building more energy. Once he was ready, he ripped the tag off from the cage and exposed a swirling seal, not too different from the seal his body bore. and as that seal opened, so too did the seal on his body. Outside, Jiraiya saw this.
Okay, things are about to start.
As a moment or two passed, a red, viscous chakra began bubbling up out of him, boiling to the surface and beyond like sea foam. Minato watched the gate finish unlocking. As soon as it did, the Nine Tails launched out. This was the moment it had been waiting for. Charging out, it swung its claws at him. Minato jumped back and bounced along the surface of the water to create distance. All the while he did this, his head was pounding. He could hear it in his ears. I got this. I got this. He rushed in with a Rasengan and prepared to use it when a tail smashed him back. Minato skid across the surface of the water. The beast then prepared a tailed beast bomb in its mouth. Minato knew that this attack was coming for him, but instead of running away, he rushed toward the beast. The Nine Tails wouldn't risk maiming itself at a point like this. Planned blast must be lighter around the Nine Tails' legs. Minato ran there, and as the ball was fired, he dodged it and made it to the legs. The explosion was bright, it was loud, and it was hot. Minato felt the heat on its skin, and he felt that he might get a sunburn from this level of chakra blast. Beyond that, the wind then blew him back away from the beast toward the cage. The following vacuum would then pull him back toward the beast. He used this moment to gain the advantage. The blast sucking him forward, he rose to his feet and ran in the direction of it, letting the pull increase his speed. However, Kurama would be ready for this and would bat Minato out of the way with one of its tails. Minato hit the ground and then stood. He then saw the beast coming at him again. This time it clawed up the ground, lifting Minato up. Despite Minato trying his best to fight back, he couldn't, and it was then that he noticed that the Nine Tails' eyes possessed not only the vertical slits of a fox, but also the horizontal slits of a toad. Kurama was also in Sage mode.
We share a body, the beast said to him. Any chakra that's not yours is shared with me if I desire to take it. I think I'll devour your soul and keep this body for myself.
Kurama opened his mouth to eat Minato, but was suddenly restrained when a bunch of chains rose from the ground and bound him, causing the fox to drop Minato. Minato hit the ground on his butt and felt a vibration run up his spine. His teeth chattered from the fall, but he recovered. He saw the chains and saw Kurama. He then witnessed as the chains dragged Kurama across the ground and back into the cage before closing it and sealing it once more. Minato stood there, confused and awestruck, when suddenly a pair of hands crossed over his shoulders and rested on his chest. The feeling of a soft stomach pushed up against his back. Minato's eyes began to overflow with tears as his teeth started to chew into his upper lip, trying to make him focus on something else. Minato turned around and hugged the woman standing there. "Kushina!" he cried out. She hugged him tightly. She knelt down to his level and pulled him back. "It's been years since I've seen you look even remotely like this. Reminds me of the day we first met. Such sweet memories, huh?" Minato rubbed his eyes and tried to smile. "They feel like a lifetime ago." "That's probably because they were," Kushina said with a chuckle. Minato's smile faded as his eyes twisted back into sorrowful distress. "Kushina." She hugged him again. "It's okay. Take your time, my love." Minato gave in to the child within and just cried. Whether this was his sorrow being manipulated by the body of an 11-year-old, or whether he deep down felt like a lost child seeking his mother, remained unknown. But what was true was that he was in intense pain right now and couldn't help but cry, trembling in her arms. With all of his strength, his heart was fragile like glass, and the cracks that had manifested had left it shattered on the floor before her. Kushina was left to pick up the pieces and put the sweet and loving heart of her Minato back together again. It wasn't the first time she had to do it, though it could well be the last. She pulled him back and looked directly into his eyes. Though the body was Naruto's, the eyes were Minato's, beyond the shadow of a doubt. "Oh, how proud I am of you, Minato, for being so strong, for fighting against the pain you feel. But you're not yet ready to take the full power of the Nine Tails. There's still something you need, and for that, you need to go back to the beginning." "The beginning of what?" Minato asked. Kushina smiled. "Us." "I don't know where that is anymore," Minato said. "Do you know how much I love you, my whirlpool?" Minato nodded. "I do. That's why it hurts so bad." She pulled him into a hug again and began to assault his cheek with kisses of the most loving variety. Minato felt like his strength was gone. His will to fight, his will to walk on, his very will to live. If she was his life's purpose, as he had said she was, and she was gone, how could he feel that his life had any meaning? He just wanted to die and be done with it. This life was a curse. This reincarnation was a cruel trick played by the Shinigami. The only thing that mattered to him was her and freeing her. That was all that mattered. All that could matter. "How do I free you? What do I do now?" She held out her hand. "You're an Uzumaki now, Minato. Let the whirlpool guide you. The whirlpool you carry inside you. It will lead you where you're supposed to go, and when you get there, you'll know. Your heart will tell you." Minato took her hands. "Please, don't leave me. I don't care if it's heaven, hell, or the Shinigami's stomach. Just take me with you." Kushina smiled.
My love, you've been so strong, but don't you give up now. You can do so much more. This generation needs you, and it would be too cruel to rob them of their Yondaime Hokage a second time. So, continue down your path. All will be fine. Just have faith. She leaned forward and kissed his cheek. Remember that you're never alone. No matter where you go or what form you take, I'll always be there with you. She then faded from sight, leaving Minato silent. Outside, Jiraiya saw the bubbling chakra disappear and saw the seal close again. Good on you, Minato. You must have done it. Jiraiya sat back, lowering his guard. Eventually, Minato opened his eyes. Did you do it? Minato sat up, stretched, and smiled. No, I sucked so hard. He gave a chuckle. I think I'm gonna need to do some studying first, Jiraiya-sensei. Jiraiya was shocked. You couldn't do it? Minato shook his head. I thought that I hadn't lost any strength, but my body still isn't in peak physical conditioning, and I failed to beat it. I tried to rely upon Sage Mode to carry the slack, but as it turns out, the Ninetales can tap into my Sage Chakra at will, so it got stronger too and trounced me. So I could only seal it up again. If it trounced you, then how'd you manage to seal it alone? That's not important. All that matters is that I get the chance to prepare for my next attempt. Is that okay, Master? Jiraiya nodded. Take your time. Minato would then get up and make his way back to Konoha, where he'd be intercepted by Kakashi. Minato would roll his head on his neck. Come on, Kakashi, I gotta have a little time for me. What do you got? Kakashi would walk alongside him. Remember when I said I was going to recommend the team to become Chunin? Well, I did, and here is an accepted. That being said, I recommended off the basis of Sasuke and Sakura's merits, not yours. While I wish to humor your decision to remain lower as to experience life as a true genin, I can't let your desires stifle the careers of Sasuke and Sakura. I hope you understand. I do. So I suppose that this test is going to be a 3-person team thing, as in they can't participate without me? That's how it always is, Kakashi said. They might be able to make exceptions, but that's generally only for the best of the best. And while Sasuke and Sakura might be able to become Chunin now, they're not good enough to merit an exception. You would, but as I said, I didn't brag much about you. And even if I did, Hiruzen already knows what you are and what you want. That being said, before Hiruzen accepts, he needs your approval, which is why I came to pick you up. Can you give your seal of approval to this so that Sasuke and Sakura can participate? Minato took a deep breath and let it out in a sigh, though there was no frustration as he smiled. Yes, Kakashi, I won't stifle their potential for selfish reasons. Let's do it. Kakashi would then begin to walk off to tell Hiruzen. Alright, I'll inform the Hokage. You grab Sasuke and Sakura and make your way to the sign-up location. Kakashi would run off. Minato would meet up with Sasuke and Sakura and tell them the good news. Sakura seemed pleased. Sasuke, however, seemed a bit upset by this turn of events, as he believed that this was all because of Minato's potential, and that it had nothing to do with him. Minato would put his hand on Sasuke's shoulder. Trust me, Sasuke, if they didn't believe you and Sakura were ready, they wouldn't have recommended it. Sasuke pushed Minato's hand from his shoulder. Mark my words. I'm going to prove to them exactly why I deserve to be a Chunin. I'm gonna carry in this exam. Minato pulled back. He was beginning to see that, regardless of if he agreed to the Chunin exams or not, his presence on Team 7 was already stifling their careers. Sasuke was growing more and more frustrated in the secret shadow of the Hokage. Minato wanted to explain things to him, but he was afraid that telling children would not be a good idea. He didn't want this getting out and affecting how people perceived him. If you want to do that, I won't get in your way. Sasuke stepped forward and put a finger in Minato's face. No, I don't want your pity, and I don't want you to let me be better. No, you're gonna do your best to beat me, and I'm going to destroy you regardless. Sasuke then began to storm off. Sakura called out for him, and she looked at Minato. Sorry, Naruto. He's just feeling a little frustrated. He feels like he's not worthy of his name. Minato waved it off. I get it. No need to explain. We just need to apply quickly so we can join the exams. That is, if you want to. Sakura smiled. Of course. If Sasuke wants to become a Chunin, I do too. Sakura began to walk off when Minato called out to her. Sakura! She looked back. It's not my business to say, but I think you should decide what's best for you, not what's best for Sasuke. If you truly want to do this, then do it, but don't bite off more than you can chew for him. Just take care of yourself. She offered a smile. Of course, Naruto. Thanks for your concern, but trust me, I am doing what's best for me. And so the trio made their way to the location Kakashi had told them about, and they signed up for the exams. That night, Minato's sleeping was less than it should be. He kept thinking about Kushina, how much he wanted to be with her, and how little he was starting to care about hanging around this world. After all, he was making this team's lives even harder. The scars hurt so badly, and he just wanted to die. Not because he was depressed particularly, but because his heart was somewhere else. All the same, he heard Kushina's voice in his head, telling him that he needed to be strong for her.
He needed to figure out for what reason he remained in this world. If he survived, then he did so for a reason, and that reason would be instrumental to the future of the world. That night, as he laid in bed, he continued to read the words of Kushina. By this time, he had already read the book cover to cover 3 times, and he was currently reading it through a 4th. To hear her voice again, he would have traded his eyes, even for only a short moment, but this was the next best thing. As midnight came around, he finally turned the lights off. He sat the book to the side upon a pillow next to his. Laying there, looking at the spine of the book, he felt as if he were with Kushina again. And maybe, even if he couldn't see her, he was. All the same, he laid there and tried to remember her touch, the feeling of her skin against his own. He tried to transport himself back in time to the last time the two shared a bed, to the last time the two of them cuddled and snuggled. It was only through this sweet memory that he could shut his mind off long enough to find rest. She was with him, even though he didn't see it, he could feel it. A kiss to his cheek, a reassuring kiss. The exams were to be what Minato expected. 3 tests designed to measure capability of the mind, teamwork, and independence. The last 2 of which would include survival skills and strength, respectively. Each test designed to completely cover the full spectrum of required abilities a shinobi needed to have. That was why, to continue through the exams, one needed to pass each test as they came about. Minato didn't expect to have many problems with this, as he was already Kage level, but he did find the written test a bit more troublesome. His mind was not always the best with math. He did have common sense, but in math and calculations, he was a bit below average. Some might ask how it was that he could be so accurate and quick and so precise without calculations. And the basic answer was that he simply relied upon his intuition. He did what felt right, and most of the time, these knee-jerk reactions were on the mark. He had long since learned to trust his gut. The issue was his gut was not as accurate as these questions required him to be, so he began to panic the more he saw math pop up. But he at least managed to finish before the time was up. It was then that the group was informed that the test was meaningless, and that the only question that mattered was the final one, a do or die question. Refusal to answer meant failure. Getting the question wrong was resigning yourself to the rank of genin for all eternity. The only path forward was to answer this question correctly. Minato didn't think that this was legal. After all, it was unlikely that all these other nations would agree to having the best of their generation locked behind genin forever for simply not answering a question correctly. Minato thought that it seemed fishy, but even if his heart did believe there was a possibility, Minato's true reason for being in this world still had little to nothing to do with his ranking. All he wanted was to save Kushina. Everything else was a bonus. So he decided to take the test anyway. But by deciding to take it, he, as well as the rest of the class, were informed that they did indeed pass. Minato would happily move on to the next round. This round was a survival test based on capture the flag. He cracked his knuckles and his neck. Sasuke put his hand on Minato's shoulder. Remember, try as hard as you can. Don't insult me. Minato stood there, unsure how to answer. If he were going to be real, he would state that it was impossible to do both. If Minato did the best that he could, that alone would be an insult to Sasuke. They were comparing a barely Chunin level shinobi to one who stood up above the other 4 Kage during his time. This was an unfair matchup, so he ignored Sasuke. One day he'd understand. And if he never did, then who gave a damn? Minato wasn't here to please Sasuke, he was here to do his job. That was it. As soon as the gates opened, the 3 entered. Minato, having been the only one to lead a team, instinctively took point. He'd begin issuing orders and explaining strategies. Taking out a map, he would gauge the terrain, the resources, and the experience of the other shinobi. Cross-referencing that with all the other shinobi from other villages, he managed to get a rough location of where their best chances were to find weaker shinobi. Most of the shinobi who were weakest would be right here, close to the river. The sound of the water would cover up sounds of their camp, and the fresh water could be used as a resource. Not to mention, it's a natural place where animals gather, so hunting would become easier. And because of that, the weakest will go there. I don't want to pick on weak shinobi. I want to take out worthy opponents, Sasuke said. Minato looked back. Don't forget what these exams are for. To call the strong from the weak. Sounds like a weakling's answer, Sasuke said. Minato looked back. We're going to the river, unless you wish to challenge my leadership. Sasuke stepped up. Maybe I do. Minato turned back. Sakura stepped between them. Both of you stop. We're supposed to be a team, and we're damn well gonna act like one. Naruto's right. What matters right now is becoming Chunin, not proving ourselves to only ourselves. And with that, Sasuke backed down. Seeing as he was outvoted, which Minato took truly as a surprise, he complied. Minato's respect for Sakura grew then, showing that she was capable of disagreeing with Sasuke, and even somewhat commanding his respect. She was strong in her own right. Minato and the rest of the team would make their way to find the scroll they required to finish their set. As they made it to the river though, they found a camp. Deserted. Minato knelt down and looked for footprints in the mud. Did they abandon this place? Did they know we were coming? Sakura asked. Sasuke had his Sharingan active. Minato knew that Sasuke knew. He spoke to Sakura. No, if you look closely, there are 4 different footprint types, each a different size than the last. The 4th shoe is the size of an adult compared to the 3 children. These shinobi were targeted. The way that they're moving insinuates a struggle. Whoever came at this group seems to have pushed them toward the river, cornering them. Did they escape? Sakura asked. Minato shrugged. I don't see a body. Guys, you might want to see this, Sasuke said from a tree limb above. Minato and Sakura followed him up. Looking back down, they were surprised to see that a massive slithering mark was present in the mud and dirt around the camp. They were attacked by a summoner, Sakura said. Looks like a snake user, Sasuke said. As he said so, Minato's mind began to fire. Was it possible? Suddenly, Sasuke cried out. Minato looked back and saw a white snake hanging from Sasuke's neck, its fangs sunk in. Minato ran over and pulled the snake off and threw it to the side. He would quickly pull a kunai and score the area, careful not to touch his carotid. He'd begin trying to suck the venom out, but it was no use. Suddenly, Sasuke fell over. As he did so, a mark appeared on his neck. There's no poison. It's a curse mark. What does it do? Sasuke asked. Minato shook his head. I've never seen anything like it. We need to bring Sasuke somewhere safe until we can figure out what to do. Worst case, we might need to forfeit. Sakura agreed. As dangerous as it was, Minato decided that they should remain close to the river. Most low-level shinobi wouldn't suspect them of being there, and the higher-level shinobi would be no match for Minato's full power, so he decided that it was best to remain, as Sasuke seemed to be developing a fever, which the cool water would cool down. So they stayed close to the water the whole time and let him rest. During this time, they'd be attacked by the genin from the hidden sound. Minato alone would step out to face them. As he fought them, not only did he push them back, but he managed to steal their scroll. This would allow them to escape. He went back to excitedly tell the others, but as he did, Sakura screamed. Minato ran back to help, only to see Sasuke jump out into the sunlight. His body was covered in black marks, and his chakra was radiating a violet color.
All you ever do is embarrass me. You, a nobody from nowhere. There's nothing special about you at all, and yet you surpass me at every turn. Me, the last Uchiha. My Kekai Genkai is the best of all, and you, a nobody with nothing to his name but a flash orange jumpsuit, can surpass it? I hate you to death.
Minato stood there silently. He put his kunai away. He wouldn't use it against his friend.
Bring it back. Do you still not see me as a threat? You still handicap yourself against me. I'll rip out your insides.
Sasuke rushed at Minato. Minato got down into a defensive position. Sasuke tipped his fingers with chakra, forming claws. Minato rolled to the side to avoid the first strike. Sasuke would immediately change position to face him again, and would then try once more to attack. Minato would flip back. Sasuke's strength and speed had increased quite a bit with this power. As Minato stood there, dodging, he could sense that this was somehow nature energy. Sasuke was in some form of sage transformation, not too unlike Snake Sage mode. This all but confirmed his suspicions that Orochimaru was somewhere around here. But why send his lackeys to face them? Was it possible that he too knew that Naruto was actually Minato? Sasuke, calm down. I never said I didn't take you as a threat. I just don't want to kill you.
If I'm a threat, then face me with everything you've got. Stop holding back. Stop holding back.
He shouted as he smashed into the ground, sending a shockwave that nearly knocked Minato off his feet. Minato took out a kunai and threw it at Sasuke. Sasuke dodged.
Finally, you're finally taking me seriously.
As he rushed Minato again, Minato would utilize the flying Raijin Jutsu to get to his kunai. He would then pick it up, cut his hand, and rush back to Sasuke. He jumped onto his back, forcing his bleeding hand down on Sasuke's curse mark. From there, symbols formed from Minato's blood began to surround the mark. Sasuke struggled, trying to beat Minato into a nearby tree trunk. Minato remained resolute, however. Evil sealing method, he shouted as he pushed his chakra into the mark. From there, the mark would be chained up by this Fuinjutsu. Sasuke cried out as the marks retracted from his body. He screamed, but not in pain, in sorrow. Tears streamed from his face. Take me seriously. Take me seriously. He then fell forward and passed out. Sakura ran to them. Minato noticed that there were 4 bleeding marks on her arm. Are you okay? Minato asked her. She nodded. Just a small scratch. She checked on Sasuke. Is he okay? Minato nodded. Yeah, but I've had enough of this stupid forest. Let's get out of here. Minato would lift Sasuke onto his back and would rush off with him through the forest toward the center, where the designated meeting place would be. They would be met by Iruka, who would call for the medical team to take Sasuke. What happened to him? Minato and Sakura looked at each other. Minato then spoke. He was attacked by a snake and branded with a curse mark. Iruka would notice the 4 slash marks on Sakura's arm. Are you okay? She nodded. It was the same shinobi who branded Sasuke. Minato knew this was a lie. Sasuke had done that to her, but all the same, Minato didn't spill the beans. That curse mark was what brought Sasuke's deepest feelings to the surface. He didn't want Sasuke to suffer because of his ill will towards him. Minato was an issue for Team 7 and was still getting in the way of Sasuke's career. And so, when he heard that the third and final round of exams would be a solo exhibition, Minato knew that his team didn't need him anymore to continue. So he dropped out of the exams completely. Kakashi would ask him why he did so, and Minato stated that he wanted to give Sasuke a chance to shine without his presence. In truth, Minato was considering leaving Team 7 as a whole. He would not be the one to bring them crashing down. Besides, he had other missions to undertake. He and Jiraiya would meet for lunch, and he would tell Jiraiya what Kushina had said to him the day he had failed to beat the Ninetales. And Jiraiya would tell him that this journey was his for now, and to contact him when he needed him. And so, Minato pondered what she meant. Where we began. Let the whirlpool guide you. Minato thought about it. He then had a flash of memory he thought he had forgot. As he stood there, he realized that there was a marking on the ground. Covered in dust and mostly invisible, it was the remains of a sealing formula. A swirl like a whirlpool. An Uzumaki clan formula. He followed it to its center and found a tower bearing the crest of the Uzumaki clan. Entering within, he saw the spiral staircase leading up. This was where Minato and Kushina's relationship truly took a turn for the best. This was a special place for them. This was where he had proposed to her. He remembered it now, vividly. As he climbed the staircase, he found a secret room, and within was a plethora of Uzumaki clan books on various forms of fuinjutsu. Minato found one detailing the dead demon-consuming seal, and particularly how it was released. The mask that was required was detailed and explained within, as well as a note as to where the mask was located now. Minato smiled. This is it. This is how I'm gonna free Kushina. He would immediately run out of the building. The note contained a map with a marking on it. He followed the map and found what he was looking for. An old shrine, broken down and dilapidated. It possessed the Uzumaki clan's sigil on the front. He knew he was there. Walking in, he found a wall covered in masks. Each one was different, and he didn't know if they would all work or only one. But he sought the mask that at least looked like the Shinigami that Kushina had used. Confirming the mask to be the one he was looking for, he took it home with him. When he got home, he read through the book and realized what had to be done to free her soul. I'm gonna have to put on the mask, summon the Shinigami, and carve open my own belly. Looking down at his hands, he began to wonder if he should. This could very well kill him. He looked up toward the heavens and took a deep breath. If I die, it's not so bad, right? Just so long as Kushina's free. Then I can at least be with my family again. He said this trying to psych himself up. He then pulled a kunai and knelt down. Putting the mask on his face, he summoned the Shinigami. He looked at the blade in his hands for a moment, the spectral image behind him doing the same. Minato opened his jacket to make it easier for him. The Shinigami did the same. Minato's heart was racing. He felt like a dishonored samurai, someone who had defiled their master's home and was now forced to commit harakiri to reclaim their honor. But then again, had he not done the same to Naruto? He had defiled his body by taking it for himself, and now he needed to offer retribution to pay back his son, by delivering him to his mother that he had not known. Kushina, Naruto, please grant me the strength to do this. He then held his tri-pronged kunai out before him. He took 4 deep breaths and let out a war cry as he drove the blade in. Coughing up blood, he felt his body begin to enter shock, but he wasn't done yet. His hands already covered in his own crimson lifeblood, he found his grip weakened. Finish it! Finish it! He shouted to himself. Suddenly, he jerked his blade to the right. With a cry and a pain he had never experienced before, he finished the deed. In that moment, he heard the cry of spirits as they left the Shinigami's opened gut. Minato had never felt such pain, a pain so intense that he couldn't even scream. He had been stabbed by Kurama, but he had, at that time, had adrenaline numbing the pain. Slowly, his whole body began to grow cold. His eyes started to roll up in his head and he bobbed forward, his masked face smashing into the blood-stained carpet below. At about that time, Jiraiya began knocking on the door. Minato! Minato! I think I may have found a way to help you capture the power of the Ninetales. Remember what you told me about Kushina? Well, it made me think. I think I know what you can do now. There was no response. Minato, open the door. I got popsicles. They're melting. There was still no response. Jiraiya put the 2 popsicles into his mouth and knelt down, looking like a walrus as he sought the spare key under the mat. Pulling it up, he unlocked the door and opened it. As soon as he did, his mouth opened and the popsicles fell out onto the floor. He scrambled to get in. Minato! Minato! He rushed over and laid the boy back. He saw the mask and the wound. He saw all the blood and bile spilt out onto the ground. Minato, what have you done to yourself? Minato! He cradled his student in his arms. Please, don't die. You can't die. Not again. You can't leave me like this again. He shook his body. Minato! Minato was laying face up on a hospital gurney, being wheeled through the entrance of Konoha General. The iridescent lights above cast a pulse of light upon his face, causing slight grimaces to appear on his visage. But one could hardly tell, as he was already in pain at this point, even though he was hardly conscious at all. Whether reality or lucid dreaming, as his squinting eyes opened, he thought he saw more than nurses in the room with him, more than his master. He thought he saw angels. He thought he saw the souls of those passing on leaving the hospital. He thought he saw Naruto and Kushina beside him, a strange feeling indeed. A mirror image of himself, looking at him, like a mirror of sorts, reflecting the innocence of his heart. Despite all of this, the pain was so intense that he felt he might vomit. But even if he did, it likely would not come from his mouth, but from the hole he carved in his own stomach. "Hold on, Minato! Hold on!" Jiraiya shouted, tears on the lower lids of his eyes. He wanted to apologize. He wanted to tell his master that he was sorry for causing him to worry. How selfish of him. Minato, in his eagerness to save his wife and son, in his desire to do what was best for them, as well as his selfishness in wanting to cast off this mortal coil, he had forgotten what pain he might have caused his master. He tried to speak, but his breath betrayed him, his voice a mere squeak compared to the words he'd hoped might exit his lips. All he could do was lift a thumb and stroke the elderly hand that gripped his own so tightly. Suddenly there was a door jamb passing above him, and Jiraiya's hand left his. It was at that moment Minato felt the finality of what he had done. His strength failing him, his mind began to burn with terror. The idea of dying. It terrified him. But all the same, there was nothing he could do. He saw a man standing above him. There was a bright light shining into his eyes and a murmuring. He felt a cool feeling, a pair of scissors cutting off the vesture that got in the way of treatment. He then felt a tiny pain, a laughable mocking of what he had already experienced, as an IV was placed into his veins. "This is not good," was the last thing he could make out before an oxygen mask pumping its namesake, or a mixture of it with some form of anesthetic, into his lungs. Slowly, Minato went to sleep. After surgery, he was placed on a ventilator, his chances of survival being next to none, with only the Ninetales unconscious as well, slowly helping fight off infection and regenerating his body. During his time there, many people visited. Kakashi, who chastised him for doing the same as his father, Sakura, who cried by his side, and even Sasuke, who showed up, threw a tantrum about Minato trying to kill himself while being on top, before crying by his side, asking him not to leave him without a brother again. Minato heard it all, but reacted to none of it. Eventually, his mind drifted off. Darkness, some dreaming, time passing by without measure. This was the nature of the Tsukiyomi. Minato had studied the ancient techniques of the Uchiha, and one of the common techniques a Mangekyo could awaken was some form of Tsukiyomi, a powerful genjutsu with nearly no equal. This technique was based upon dreams, forcing someone into a dream or a nightmare of the caster's choosing, or perhaps even of the user's choosing. There, time passed on a different dimensional plane. Days could pass by in the span of seconds, or seconds could pass by in the span of days. There was no way to determine how long one was asleep within their own dream, and that was the crux of this technique. Despite not having been cast under it, Minato was experiencing something very similar. It was called a coma. Some said that people in comas couldn't dream, but that was theoretical. The brain always worked, and it was possible that one did dream. Some believed it didn't happen, but there were statements from people in them that dreams were possible, and Minato was now part of that group. He dreamt of the past, of a possible future. He saw himself in another world, sealing the Ninetales earlier than expected, given the chance to cut the cord of his own son, planting a flying Raijin seal on the babe as any overprotective father might. The moment the babe was taken, he could take him back and kill whoever stole him. No attack, no escape of the tailed beast, a future where he got up, grabbed a cup of coffee, and read the day's paper as his wife cooked for them a wonderful breakfast. His teenage son, now Chunin, wearing a flak jacket over a black outfit with orange accents. Short hair and custom tri-pronged kunai, gifts from Minato. What a wonderful dream. Perhaps a gift from Naruto and Kushina for freeing the souls trapped in the Shinigami. But sadly, not everything could last. Minato opened his eyes, and again he was alone in this shell. He was glad to be alive after having tasted death once more, but in a way he was sad to be away from his family. Suddenly he realized what he had done. He looked down at the now mostly healed wound, a deep scar left behind. He was overcome with guilt, knowing that this was not his body, and that the visage of his son was now permanently marked because he'd been hasty and selfish. He laid back. He heard murmurs outside, idle chat between nurses who were apparently not doing their jobs. Minato did not know how long he'd been out, but he knew that it must have been long enough to have the wound heal. Maybe around 2 weeks? Maybe less if the Ninetales had helped him. He stood and nearly fell to his knees. He sat there for a few moments and took a couple couple deep breaths in and out to make sure that the head rush didn't cause him to pass out. As he rose to his knees, he made it to the blinds. He needed sunlight. If he was truly awake, then he needed light. He opened the blinds and took in the sights of the village. Something felt off about the scene though, yet he couldn't place his finger on it. That was when he suddenly noticed. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5? He counted the faces on the Hokage rock. There were 5 faces. One was female. It was Tsunade. Suddenly, one of the nurses came into the room and saw Minato standing there. She gasped. As Minato looked back, the nurse stuck her head out the door to call another of her peers. "Ring the Kage! Code word! 4 has come too!" The nurse then turned back to Minato and grabbed him by the arm and led him back to the bed. "Please rest, Mr. Namikaze. Your strength is yet to return." "What's going on? What's up with the new face on the Hokage rock?" Minato asked. "And Mr. Namikaze? What's up with that? My name's Uzumaki. Naruto Uzumaki." The nurse slowly nodded her head to what he was saying. "Someone is on their way right now to explain everything, but for now it's best you remain in bed. We don't want you hurting yourself." Minato obliged, but he refused to remain lying flat. He sat the chair up. He didn't want to risk going back to sleep at this moment and re-enter that coma. It wasn't long until Tsunade arrived in the room, flanked on both sides by Anbu, who stayed outside the door. A third entered the room, checked the windows, closed the blinds, and turned on a light that cast light away from the blinds. The Anbu agent then left the room as Tsunade grabbed the chair and sat down. Minato was obviously confused. Tsunade spoke. "It's so good to see you again, Minato." Minato is shocked. "Tsunade, Jiraiya? Did Jiraiya say something?" Tsunade nodded. "Indeed he did." Minato rolled his eyes. "I wanted to remain anonymous." "I understand, but that's obviously no longer possible." She sat back in her chair. "I bet you're wondering what's going on. You saw outside." Minato nodded. "I saw your face on Hokage Rock. What's going on?" Tsunade sat forward. "You don't know? Nobody told you?" Minato seemed nervous suddenly. "Tell me what?" Tsunade looked away from Minato in hopes of formulating a good way to say what she was about to say, but when no better way presented itself, she decided just to rip off the band-aid. "You've been asleep, Minato, for 3 years." Minato's eyes opened. "What?" Tsunade took a deep breath. "When you wounded yourself, you struck many vital organs. You went in at an angle and pulled in a diagonal direction. To that end, you actually missed most of your stomach. You did cut a bit of it when you reached your liver, but you ended up cutting through parts of the small and large intestines. Due to the circumstances, your recovery is, well, truthfully, it's miraculous. There was a removal of certain organs." "What organs?" Minato asked. Tsunade took out the chart. Due to carving into organs that are used to filter or process food, various different toxins entered your bloodstream and other organs. This resulted in the removal of part of your stomach, your large intestine, and about 10 feet of your small intestine. In all honesty, you're lucky. Your organs were becoming gangrenous. In surgery, your heart stopped. It says here about 8 times across the 3 surgeries you had. First, reconstructive, second, salvage, and the third was complete resection. Your survival was based completely on your tailed beast, and it was believed that without it, you might never wake up again. The only reason why you aren't dead right now is due to the superhuman strength and regenerative abilities of your tailed beast, which I alone took into account when I was brought in for the 3rd surgery. Minato seemed confused. Tsunade continued. "You'll be able to live a relatively normal life and even resume your work as a shinobi, but you'll need to take dietary supplements to be able to get back to full strength. Various muscle massages and even the occasional steroid injection were given to make sure you didn't lose any muscle mass while asleep." "What happened to Hiruzen?" Minato said, skipping to the next subject. Tsunade looked up. She took a deep breath. "About a month after you were admitted to the hospital, during the Chunin exams, Orochimaru launched an assault against the Leaf with the help of Tsunagakure. The village was sacked by the cooperative efforts of Suna and Oto, and during the onslaught, Hiruzen was killed. I was forced to take up the position as interim Hokage. It was Hiruzen's wishes that Danzo not take his place for some reason." Minato nodded. He knew exactly why. He and Hiruzen had conversed about it before. "That being said, I only ever planned to be interim for a while, to keep it out of the hands of Danzo, and Jiraiya thought it was best to officially announce your return. You're going to replace me, and take your rightful place as Hokage as soon as the time comes and you're healed." "What happened to Kakashi and the rest of Team 7? Minato asked. "Kakashi's fine, as is Sakura Haruno. Sasuke, however, was taken by Orochimaru. He was apparently a planned vessel, but with me having refused to heal Orochimaru's arms, he likely took another instead. So there's a good chance Sasuke's still alive, but he won't be for long. Besides that, we've been at war with Suna for a while, and it seems that Suna is soon going to be out of it. They've suffered heavy losses, and now that their newest Kage, Gaara, is dead, I don't anticipate they'll be around for much longer." Suna will likely fall to ruin and be absorbed completely by the Land of Wind, probably demilitarized. Good riddance, I say. Minato tried to stand again, but almost passed out. What are you doing? Tsunade asked as she lifted him up. I'm going to save Sasuke. In this condition? Have you lost your rational mind, Minato? Minato shook his head. No, I did this. I wasn't here. I failed the village and my partner. I gotta make it right. Tsunade sat him back in the bed, whether he wanted to or not. Minato, calm down. You're having a panic attack. Minato just looked at her. She continued, none of this is your fault. You're not omnipotent, omniscient, or omnipresent. You don't decide what anyone does, and the past is in the past. Right now, we need to think things through. If you truly blame yourself for acting rashly, then don't try to make up for it by acting rashly again. Minato knew she had a point. Okay, she sighed. I've got a file for you to read over that explains all the important changes to Konoha, as well as the current changes to the political state of the world. If you're gonna retake your position as 4th Hokage, then you need to be ready with this. And what if I don't want to be Hokage again? Minato asked. Tsunade looked back at him as she was about to leave. The people need to know that things are going to be okay. With the various wars, the threat of the tailed beasts being stolen by the Akatsuki, and Orochimaru's attack, people need to have certainty. You're the most venerated Hokage besides Hashirama Senju himself, a symbol of hope. You've got no choice but to accept. Minato couldn't argue that, so he simply decided to get ready. He read through the file. It detailed the war, the operations taken before, during, and after it, including any information they might have on Orochimaru, as well as this new Akatsuki. He read through everything he needed. He tried his best to eat as much as he could, though this had become more of a chore than it previously had been. But after this, with the doctor's approval, he was allowed to be discharged into the care of Jiraiya. Jiraiya was quiet most of the time. It was clear that he was resentful of Minato for his attempt to kill himself, even if it was due to his desire to free Kushina, the purpose he thought he'd been left behind for. But considering that he was currently still alive, maybe he had another purpose. When he had time, he got back to working out. It was imperative that he once again hone this body into a fine weapon. After considering that he was now post-pubescent, his body had sprung up like a leek. He was taller now, leaner, and capable of growing muscle faster, so he took advantage of all of it. It was a bit more strenuous than before due to his new dietary limitations, but he pushed through. During this time, he'd be brought out in front of the crowd by Tsunade, who would wrap around his shoulders the haori that said Yondaime Hokage down his spine, before placing upon his head the conical hat that bore the kanji for fire. This was the ceremony, the second inauguration and celebration of the return of the 4th Hokage. It was so awkward. People asked questions as to how he survived. Some refused to believe he survived at all, thinking Konoha took them for fools. Others stated that he was an abomination and proof that Konoha had been using Orochimaru's experiments for their own gain. The reception of Minato was mixed at best, but the people trusted in their former leader to bring the security they had been seeking for so long. Having been restored to his station, Minato sat down in the seat that once had been his and looked out the window to reflect. He needed to try and explain within himself how all this could have happened. Last he remembered, he was a genin on Team 7, known as Naruto Uzumaki, and then he wakes up as Minato the Hokage? This wasn't the first time in his life that he was completely shaken up by a titanic shift in his own self-perception. Kurama himself had revealed to him the true nature of his spirit once before, in what had been a complete upheaval of who he was. And now, despite knowing, he felt his life had been ripped up from the roots once again, flung through the air. He was having to acclimate to being who he was. But even though most of the staff and administration expected him to take it easy and coast off his previous image, Minato didn't have time for that. He knew that if he was to save Sasuke, he would need to be as strong as he possibly could be, and that required his training. Particularly right now, he sought the power of his tailed beast. He would call for Jiraiya. Jiraiya would show up, but he wouldn't be very engaging in conversation. It seems we have some dirty laundry to air, Minato said as he sat close to the table, twiddling his thumbs, avoiding eye contact. Jiraiya looked at him and then looked away. If this is about me hurting myself, Minato said, you know, You didn't have to do it? Yeah, I know that, Jiraiya cut Minato off. I was gonna say that I just wanted to save my wife. No, you just wanted to die. Don't kid yourself, Minato, Jiraiya said. If you hadn't planned to die that day, you would have told me what you were planning. You would have told anyone something, but you didn't. You knew you'd be unable to call for help, and you didn't ask for any to be there, or for anyone to call for it. So stop lying to me and stop lying to yourself. Minato sat back in his chair. He quietly measured his words and contemplated what he was going to say next. Jiraiya-sensei, You're right. I did go into it planning to die. I tried to give myself some excuse. My wife is dead and my son's body is inhabited by a ghoul that shouldn't be here. I'm alive to do something, and I said to myself, it is to free Kushina, and that's all it is.
I suppose that tells me what our relationship boils down to.
Minato's eyes widened. No, I didn't mean it like that. Jiraiya shook his head.
No, you did. You acted out that way. Apparently you didn't love me. If you had, you would not have attempted to end your life.
Minato sat there. Master, I didn't mean to say I didn't love you. You must understand despair. My beliefs and my time on this planet, I thought it was over. And yes, I wanted it to be over because my family's gone. Not that you're not my family, but do you not know what it's like to watch the woman you care for die? Do you not know what it's like to hold the body of your son in your arms?
I do,
Jiraiya spoke.
3 years ago, I held my son as he bled out on his living room floor due to a self-inflicted wound.
Minato was overwhelmed. He nearly began to cry. Jiraiya,
You're gonna apologize, aren't you?
Jiraiya said. He sat forward.
I forgive you.
Tears forming in his eyes as well, he poked the desk forcefully with one finger, as if marking this moment in both time and space for posterity.
I forgive you.
Minato stood and walked around the table and hugged his master. Jiraiya then spoke.
I simply want you to realize what it does to other people. You act like nobody loves you, that no one remains who will be hurt. There will always be someone who hurts. When you die, you leave a scar behind in reality, and that pain can be felt. Don't think narrow-mindedly. Don't act like pain is all your life can be. And don't act like the world will be better off without you. It won't. It'll never be better off because you're no longer in it. I had better not ever, ever, ever find you in the same position again.
You won't. I promise, Minato spoke. For 3 years, Jiraiya had held this pain in, boiling on it, seething. And yet, the first thing he said after Minato apologized was, I forgive you. A level of strength only present in love existed in that apology. It was easy to apologize, but it was hard to forgive. Only through love could one be capable of forgiveness like this. And it seemed such an impossible feat in the modern world. But it was possible. As they finished hugging, Minato and Jiraiya decided to go out and get a popsicle together. Perhaps it was overdone, the popsicle shtick, but if there ever was an appropriate time for the two of them to get one, it was right now. Because for 3 years, Minato had been as if he were dead, and now he was alive again, and that was cause for celebration. They took it easy for the rest of the day. They needed to take care of themselves for now. An important lesson for the Yellow Flash indeed. The lesson being that sometimes it was a good thing to slow down. Lightning speed was not the only speed, and certain times, taking it slow was more appropriate. The day after, however, they got to work. I need to find a better way to subdue the Ninetales, Minato said. Jiraiya would then pull out a journal.
3 years ago, I had an idea as to how you would do it, but you entered your coma, so I wrote it down so I wouldn't forget. Perhaps it was also a silent wish that you wouldn't die, that you would live long enough for me to tell you.
Minato smiled. I'm alive, aren't I? Jiraiya nodded and then opened up the journal.
Ah, yes. The answer was obvious. Kushina had stopped the Ninetales with their adamantine chains. And now, being that you inherited the body of an Uzumaki, you should also possess that ability. Using the vast repository of Uzumaki knowledge you found, it shouldn't be too hard to learn. So I suggest you start there and we begin practicing the technique.
Minato nodded. Kushina explained it to me one time and what it felt like. It shouldn't be too hard to learn. And so together they went to the Uzumaki Tower. They followed the stairs up and into the library where they proceeded to search through the various books about sealing jutsu until they found what they were looking for. Together they read it, and Jiraiya would proceed to help Minato master it. Minato understood that the chains themselves had sealing formula inscribed into them, but were manifested by the chakra. Essentially, one needed to form sealing patterns out of their chakra, which would take mental prowess to do. But the chains themselves were surprisingly easy to generate. They required a vast amount of chakra, which is likely why the technique was only something the Uzumaki could really do. But eventually, through hard work, Minato not only could create long and numerous chakra chains, but could even inscribe into them sealing formulas. And with this technique mastered, Minato decided to try again. Once more, Jiraiya stood at the ready with a tag as Minato dove into his own mind. There he saw the beast seething in the darkness of the cage, its eyes filled with insanity and madness brought on through wrath.
You tried to kill us,
it shouted at him. Minato didn't respond.
You have nothing to say. You plan to rip the tag off and fight again? Fine, do so. But know this, I will destroy you, and then I'll leave this body and wreak havoc on the village.
Minato opened the cage. At this point, there was no reasoning with Kurama. As he looked into the beast's eyes, he thought that at a time he might have been able to befriend him, but an angry and hateful part of him was present, and far too powerful for Minato's paltry excuses and apologies to reach. So there was no point. Kurama had been treated as a weapon and had grown to resent his masters, vowing to be a weapon against them that no words could alter. And so now Minato decided to simply continue their tradition and leave him as nothing more than a weapon. As sad as it was, this was the only choice. He needed the beast's power, and the beast couldn't be set free, so a weapon he was. As soon as the cage opened, Minato dodged backward. This time, Kurama didn't rush out. The door opened, but Kurama remained in the dark. Minato was confused. He suddenly saw a tailed beast ball launch from the darkness. He barely had enough time to dodge. Even as the yellow flashed, there was hardly any chance for him to dodge the speed and size of that attack. It left a massive explosion that pushed him toward Kurama. The beast stepped into the light and opened his mouth to swallow Minato, and that's exactly what he did. Minato found himself in the beast's mouth, traveling down its throat and into his stomach. Falling in, he was covered in a liquid that burned his skin. He would rage and rush to the wall of the stomach, where he'd channel lightning release and begin assaulting the side of the cavity. This caused spasms and contortions in the muscles around the stomach, forcing the stomach to pump itself. Suddenly, the contents were ejected as Kurama vomited it all back out. Minato went sprawling, but he was up in a flash as the beast staggered a bit. Minato would then form a big ball Rasengan and smash the beast in the face with it, sending Kurama flying back into the cage, smashing against the wall in the back. But Minato did not close the cage. On the contrary, he would utilize his newly formed chakra chains and drag the beast back out. Kurama attempted to fight, but his chakra was suppressed by these chains that dragged him out of the cage. Pulling him close, Minato formed various Tori gates to pin Kurama down. He then proceeded to utilize his chakra chains to further immobilize him, as if afraid that he might somehow escape. Minato would then pull the chakra from Kurama into himself. On the outside, Jiraiya watched Minato as the bubbling red chakra began to boil faster. Suddenly, the chakra grew thicker and hotter, until suddenly it enveloped him. This was Nine-Tails chakra mode. Minato looked down as he awakened. I managed to do it. I subdued the Nine-Tails. Its chakra is now mine to control. Minato, from there, continued his work around the village, sending out teams to search for Orochimaru. But what he did next was contact Itachi in secret. He would tell him about Orochimaru having taken Sasuke, and that Sasuke's life was in danger. Itachi, in return, would give Minato all the information he needed, telling Minato about the planned meeting place and how the Akatsuki were planning to kill off Orochimaru. Minato understood. He saw himself as being able to take out two birds with one stone here, taking on Orochimaru and possibly ending his life, while further killing one of the Akatsuki members who'd been responsible with the killing of Gaara and the taking of his tailed beast. Now, it was no secret that Gaara wasn't a friend to Konoha, but there were implications behind the Akatsuki attempting to gather tailed beasts. They had already attempted to take the tailed beasts of other shinobi villages, and Minato just couldn't shake this feeling in the pit of his stomach that somehow the Akatsuki were partially responsible, if not completely responsible, for the deaths of Kushina and Naruto. This was further corroborated by Itachi, who stated that the same man who had released the Nine-Tails all those years ago was indeed among their ranks, so consider them to be on priority hit list. Minato and a select group of Anbu would stake out the location and wait for Sasori to arrive. Once he did, Orochimaru and Kabuto appeared. They talked for but a moment before they started to fight. Minato wanted to let them kill each other, but upon seeing that Orochimaru might attempt to escape after his failed assassination attempt on Sasori, Minato said that they should move out. He needed to find Sasuke first, though, before he could kill Orochimaru. So he told the Anbu that went after him to follow him to the location where Orochimaru's base was, and to ping him when they found it. And so Minato arrived to face Sasori. Sasori attempted to utilize his puppet armor's tail to poison Minato, but Minato would simply dodge it. Something would shatter the tail so fast that Sasori couldn't see it. Sasori pulled back the stump of a wooden appendage and looked at it. Suddenly, before he could react, Minato was on him, striking him silly. As the puppet armor shattered under the Hokage's foot, Sasori's true form appeared before him. Sasori knew at this point not to mess with the Hokage, so he pulled out all the stops. He utilized his red secret technique, performance of 100 puppets. Certain that numbers would give him the advantage, Sasori sent them toward Minato. As the puppets grew close, there was a momentary gleaming in the area around Minato as they began to explode just from getting close. Sasori couldn't understand what was happening. While his puppets continued to attack, Sasori would utilize his poisoned wire. As the wire moved toward Minato's location, one of the many gleaming objects that had originally been too quick to see slowed down and grabbed the wire. Sasori saw that it was an adamantine chain. He would suddenly be taken off guard as he was pulled toward Minato by the chain. As he did, Minato gripped the body by the neck and used the Ninetales emotion and chakra sensory techniques to realize that all that could truly be called Sasori was the little socket on his chest, where with his only biological part, his heart, remained. Pulling the heart chamber from the socket, he dropped the puppet into the water below. He held it out in front of him. "Tell me everything you know about the Akatsuki. Who are its leaders? What is its goal?" he asked. The heart could not speak for itself, but the emotions it carried within were translatable into words and meanings. And the meaning of the current emotion it was using was piss off. Minato sighed. "I'll figure it out eventually." He crushed the tube and its contents before dropping them into the river. It was then that he got communications from his scouting team. They had located the lair of Orochimaru and were awaiting Minato's orders. Minato told them he'd be there in a moment. He instructed the captain to throw the kunai at the nearest tree limb, which the captain did. Mere moments later, Minato would appear there, having teleported himself in. Looking down over the building where Orochimaru had disappeared to, Minato led the group in. There, they confronted Orochimaru and proceeded to fight against him. "I see. So the fourth Hokage himself has graced me with his presence. Where's Sasuke?" Minato asked. Orochimaru spoke. "Would me telling you change my fate?" Minato was silent. "I thought not," Orochimaru said. "I think I'll take my chances then." Orochimaru pressed a button on a remote. Suddenly they realized they were in a laboratory filled with vats, filled with mutated creatures. Neither animal nor human, but something in between. The vats opened, and the creatures that had been asleep began to stir and press against the glass. Suddenly the glass shattered, and the creatures launched out at the Anbu agents. Minato rushed back to help them. Orochimaru began to escape, but suddenly was stopped by Minato. Orochimaru was confused. He looked back and saw multiple Minatos running around, helping the Anbu. "You thought I couldn't be in 2 places at once? What's the multi-shadow clone jutsu for, if not this?" Orochimaru smiled. "I should have expected no less from Jiraiya's most promising pupil. Or are you?" Minato was confused at what he meant by this. Suddenly, Orochimaru attacked him and locked blades. Minato struggled. Orochimaru's tongue slid out from between his lips and licked Minato's face. "You and I aren't so different, are we? We both have stolen the body of another to survive the fate planned for us." Minato pushed back. "I'm nothing like you." Orochimaru laughed. "Oh, but you are. So long as you wear the flesh of your own son like that, you'll always be like me." Orochimaru grinned with the most evil smile. "What's hilarious is that you've discovered a new, more morbid way of transferring one's life force. You discovered the perfect way to reincarnate, something I'll soon utilize myself. Every 3 years, my user's body rejects me, but you gained a whole new lifespan. I wonder, can I possibly use the power of Genjutsu to force someone to utilize the Reaper Death Seal and have me and my target switch bodies? I'd never considered the power of the Shinigami before. Use death to sustain life. Such a novel idea." He laughed again. Minato roared and struck the ground with a Rasengan. This launched Orochimaru up into the air, but despite this, Orochimaru was well in control of himself. Minato rose to meet him, only to clash blades once again. Minato clinched his teeth together. Orochimaru stood there and watched. "What if I could resurrect your family? Would that be enough to get me off the hook?" Minato was shocked. "What? You actually figured out how to circumvent death?" Minato hadn't thought it possible. Orochimaru raised an eyebrow. "Piqued your interest. Maybe I'll show you how to do it. All I ask in return is a full pardon, and the chance to do whatever I will with the resources Konoha has at its disposal. Think of the leaps in the development of mankind we could achieve together. And all at such a minimal cost." Minato felt his hand twitch. Whether it was due to nervousness, temptation, or rage, he didn't know. "What is this technique?" "Edo Tensei," Orochimaru said. "Impure world reincarnation. With the technique once lost to time, sealed away by Tobirama Senju, I have reconstructed this technique using inspiration from legendary techniques the world over. I can do it. I can resurrect the dead into immortal bodies." "Then why must you keep jumping bodies?" "Resurrect yourself and be done with it," Minato said. "Doctor, heal thyself," Orochimaru said. "Perhaps I could do such a thing, but the level of trust required is beyond any human being I know. I won't risk that." "Where are your Edo Tensei then?" Minato asked. Orochimaru smiled. "I'm glad you asked." It was at that moment 2 coffins rose from the ground, one labeled Shodai and the other Nidaime. The coffins opened, and from within came both the first and second Hokage, the brothers Senju, Hashirama, and Tobirama.
The appearance of those two legendary Kage startled Minato. If Orochimaru had this kind of power under his control, then he was truly a threat to the whole world. Suddenly, two more coffins appeared beside him, both of which had a swirling pattern on them. One said Kushina, and the other said Naruto. "What's your decision, Yondaime?" Orochimaru asked. Minato was utterly speechless. He could hardly believe what he was looking at. These creatures seemed so robotic. It was obvious to Minato that if these truly were real, that they were nothing more than the slaves of Orochimaru. "Offer declined, Snake. I'd rather have my wife and child be happy and away from me than to be slaves in my presence." Orochimaru sighed. "It truly is a shame you think that, but I suppose then this is my ticket out of here." Suddenly, the coffins opened, and the Edo Tensei of both Kushina and Naruto appeared from within. Naruto appeared to be nothing more than a 5-year-old, while Kushina appeared to be the way she was at death. Minato stood there, two of the greatest shinobi of all time standing before him, and behind him his own wife and child. Rage began to build up inside of him. "Orochimaru! Orochimaru!" The snake began to rush out the back exit. Minato clashed with the mind-controlled Hashirama and Tobirama. Pushed back, he would have Naruto come in on all fours. It seemed that his spirit had somehow inherited remnants of Kurama's chakra. While he may not have had a cloak, he possessed some chakra in the form of a tail, ears, and claws. That being said, as he fought against the first and second Hokage, he realized that none of them were truly as powerful as the legends had said. Are they holding back? Minato wondered. Or is it possible that the jutsu is incomplete? And so he utilized his chakra chains to subdue them all. Outside the building, Orochimaru was making his way through the forest when suddenly he was tackled out of the air. Hitting the ground, his assailant disappeared in a puff of smoke. Suddenly, 4 Minatos appeared and grabbed him, each one tightly holding his 4 limbs. A 5th one appeared holding a kunai. "How do I break control over them?" he demanded as he pushed the kunai to Orochimaru's throat. Orochimaru smiled. "I'll tell you. For a price." "Minato, listen." "What's your price?" Orochimaru's smile evolved into a toothy grin. "My freedom. Right here and now. I want to escape. If you let me go, I'll tell you how to free them." Suddenly, the 4 Minato holding his limbs disappeared. Orochimaru stood. Minato holstered his kunai. "Fine, tell me." Orochimaru performed the hand sign to give the Edo their free will. He then showed Minato how to dispel them. "Dispel them if you wish, or keep them as a gift of gratitude." Orochimaru then fled. Minato did nothing to chase after him or stop him. After all, he had promised to let the snake go. But he didn't promise that nobody else would try to take him out. "He's moving in your direction, Kakashi. Lethal force authorized." As Orochimaru jumped to a tree limb, he did not see the lightning cutter-clad hand until it pierced through his heart. Kakashi had a score to settle. All those years ago, he had let Orochimaru escape due to fear, and now he was setting things right. Back inside the base, Minato would dispel Tobirama and Hashirama. He then came to Kushina and Naruto and prepared to do the same, but was left unsure. Could he really do it? Was this not like killing them himself? He released them from the chains. They each hugged him as Minato began to cry. By this point, the Anbu had swept house and cleared it of all threats. Minato knelt down and lifted Naruto into his arms. The boy was so cold, a dead body, yet a spirit bound to it. Kushina was no different, and, well, Minato wasn't any different either. Warm indeed, but a dead body possessed no less. "I can't do it," he said to them. "I can't let you go, not again. I lost you once, I can't do it again." Kushina stroked his face. "Baby, it's okay. Remember what I told you. My love is with you forever. I'm always gonna be there. Being as we are, it's an abomination. Trapped in this world, we were happier beyond." Minato felt his own tears streaming down his face. "It hurts so much to do this alone. I can't do it again." Minato felt the head of Naruto touch his. "But Daddy, you're not alone. You have me. I'm a part of you." "I stole your body," Minato said to him. Naruto shook his head. "No, you gave me my body. All I did was give it back. I want you to have it. A piece of me lives inside of it, and so does a piece of mommy. So don't be scared. You're a strong person. You beat the bad guys. You're the young dummy Hokage. Why couldn't I have died that day and you live? Why couldn't you live in my stead now? I don't deserve to live a second time, especially if it means that you couldn't even live once." "Calm down, Minato. It's all right," Kushina said. "Where we are, it's beautiful. Naruto is truly living there. A lot more than he ever could have here. And so am I. We're not dead. We're just in another dimension. One where you'll join us one day. Our bodies aren't the end. They're at the beginning. Like a cicada shell, we shed it, and now we're happy." "I don't want to be alone again," Minato said. "But you won't be. We'll be with you wherever you go. Love can do that. It transcends dimensions, time and space. It's stronger than any jutsu and faster than any Hokage.
We will always be with you, just as Naruto said. Never forget that. She hugged onto him. Do it, Minato. Minato, in their embrace, raised his finger, but did not dispel. He was still not strong enough. He then felt a pair of lips touch his cheek and the voice of one so small and innocent ring in his ears. It's okay, Daddy. Please, do it. Clenching his teeth, he held the finger up. Release. And in that moment, they faded to ashen paper in his arms, their spirits ascending to heaven. A moment later, the light faded and Minato was alone. He was emotionally shattered there. He only managed to recover when the Anbu captain called for him. Drying his eyes, he made his way forward. He found Sasuke bound, so he unshackled Sasuke, who stumbled forward. Sasuke, are you hurt? Minato asked. Suddenly, a fist struck his cheek. Minato fell on his back. You bastard. How dare you try and kill yourself before we had the chance to settle the score? You were supposed to make it to the last round with me, and you tried to kill yourself. Sasuke knelt down and punched him again. The Anbu pulled him off of Minato, but Minato waved them off. Sasuke sat there on his knees. And you didn't even tell me you were the Hokage. Things make so much sense now. You were always Hokage, and you kept that from us. Minato crawled forward and sat in front of Sasuke. I didn't want to overshadow you. But you did overshadow me, and I thought it was my fault. Minato hugged him. I'm sorry, Sasuke. I can never say sorry enough for the selfish way I treated you, Sakura, Kakashi, Jiraiya. I was selfish in keeping myself hidden, in trying to kill myself. I was selfish. I didn't think about anyone else. But I want to make amends. How? Sasuke asked. Minato smiled. We're going to get justice for the Uchiha now. I'm calling Itachi home and having Danzo and all the conspirators arrested. Konoha needs to set the record straight, flush out corruption, and return to the village we were always planned to be. And I'll make sure that Itachi returns with a hero's welcome. And that's exactly what happened. Minato brought Itachi home and explained to Konoha that it was a frame job. He did alter the details quite a bit to make Itachi sound better though. The Anbu launched a mission during the time of the third Hokage, prior to my death. The mission was unauthorized and ended with the death of the Uchiha. Itachi, the only survivor besides his brother Sasuke, was blamed for this incident by none other than Danzo Shimura and Root, an organization that as of today no longer exists. Despite his position, Itachi was stalwart in his defense of Konoha, and used his time outside the village to spy on the Akatsuki, a terrorist organization that we've come to learn was responsible for the Ninetales attack 15 years ago. The Uchiha were wrongly accused, and their uprising that was planned was out of fear that they would be retaliated against, which they eventually were. Danzo will pay for his crimes, life in prison, a proper judgment, his life forfeit due to his acts of genocide and treason, yet his life preserved in payment for the few good things he did for the village. As of now, Itachi is named the new head of the Uchiha clan, with his brother Sasuke as his second. Konoha will afford funds and reparations to the Uchiha for their pain and suffering as apologies for the mistakes made by one rogue, greedy, and corrupt ruler with too much power. Minato turned to face Itachi and bowed. We hope and pray that not only the Uchiha, but the whole of Konoha can forgive its administration for their blundering failure at protecting their own. On behalf of all of Konoha, to the Uchiha, I apologize. Itachi accepted this, and due to him now being in Konoha, he was able to get true medical treatment. The illness he had was caught, and with the help of Tsunade, as well as the transplant of Eternal Mangekyo Sharingan between brothers, Itachi would be cured of his illness. Peace resumed, but only for a time. Minato commissioned that the Akatsuki be hunted, their names be given high bounties in the bingo book. Itachi, hoping to aid in this effort, was named captain of this anti-Akatsuki strike force, and with his help, he and his squad managed to hunt down and defeat Hidan and Kakazu. Konoha, having been shaken up by the controversy, found their faith restored due to Minato's leadership, and with the defeat of Hidan and Kakazu. Minato sat in his office, looking out over the village with a smile. Ever since his release of the souls of Naruto and Kushina, his own pain had been released. It was like he were the same old Minato he'd always been. He could never be seen without a smile on his face. Tsunade and Jiraiya would become the new members of the Konoha Council, appointed by Minato himself for their wisdom in an effort to replace Danzo and the corruption that had existed alongside him. Things were really looking up. The wars were over. Peace existed, and the people felt confident in their leadership once again. Sasuke was finally happy, and Itachi was doing work within Konoha. The only darkness there was that Minato could not undo the damage done. He could not revive the dead Uchiha. But he refused to fall back into that pitfall. The dead were gone now, and leaving them to rest was better than bringing them back. And now it was time for Sasuke and Itachi to move on, to let go of the pain of the past and embrace the love they still had. After all, the Mangekyo Sharingan was awakened by hatred. but the eternal Mangekyo Sharingan was a byproduct of brotherly love. Perfect symbology of how hatred may give you strength, but will in the end lead you to blindness, and possibly even a grave. In fact, he was talking about it with them at this very moment. However, as if his talking about the concept of pain had summoned it to them, the village came under attack. Minato stood and looked out the window to see multiple beasts appearing in the distance. Not tailed beasts, but powerful creatures, each of which had the ability to devastate the village. The attack was looking like it could be worse than the one they faced 15 years prior. Itachi, Sasuke, get out there. Utilize your Susanoo to push back these creatures. Call Jiraiya and Tsunade. They'll have Gamabunta and Katsuyu join you. Minato then activated his Nine Tails chakra mode. He felt something. These beasts had a master. In fact, they had what felt to be 6 masters. Minato rushed out into the village to face them, and there he encountered the 6 paths of pain. So, I assume you're Pain, leader of the Akatsuki? I assume Itachi told you about me, Pain asked. He did. Saved me the trouble of hunting you down myself. Pain stood silent for a moment, his face ever stoic. Tell Itachi that I came to take his scarlet ring back, and I might as well take the Nine Tails while I'm here. Over my dead body, Minato stated as he crossed his arms. For the first time in a while, Pain cracked a slight smile. That's the idea. The 6 paths rushed at Minato, but Minato brought to bear his true strength. He plowed right through the Asura path before it could even bring its weaponized arms to bear, sending shattered screws and busted bolts flying everywhere. Not long after, he turned back to basically one-shot the human path before immediately kicking the Preta path in 2. Is this really all you've got? He asked. Pain crossed his arms and then spoke. Don't get full of yourself, Yondaime Hokage. I was measuring your strength. The Animal path and the Naraka path alone remained beside the Diva path. Animal was the next to engage, but it did not engage without support. Diva wasn't far behind, keeping distance but still pushing. Minato would roll across the ground from the Diva Path's almighty push. Animal Path would then begin striking at him viciously. In the distance, Naraka Path would gather the bodies of the other defeated Pains and place them into the mouth of the King of Hell, allowing each one to return, revived and returned to full strength. As I said, is this all you've got? Pain, hovering in the air, pointed back. No, this here is all I have. He showed Minato the many paths behind him. Minato feigned ignorance. How the hell? I defeated all you. You can never defeat us, Pain said. Minato rolled his neck and popped it. Fine, round 2. He rushed at them straight, but before he struck the Preta path, he used the Botter Flicker technique and appeared behind the Naraka, dropping an elbow on the back of its neck, being certain to put this one out of commission first. He looked up at Pain with a smile on his face. Don't think you were the only one that was learning from his enemy as he fought. Diva realized that he couldn't underestimate this enemy. He had heard the legends of the 4th Hokage, but the man in the flesh was more than the myth. I take this to be the true power of Jiraiya's other student. No wonder he favored you over me, leaving me behind, but returning to you. But despite your potential, you do not possess divine providence. I am born to bring about a new world order, and not even the Hokage of this world can stop me. Minato was shocked to realize that this was the student Jiraiya had taught him about. Nagato? Suddenly, the remaining paths of pain ganged up on him. The Asura path struck him with missiles that blew Minato back. The Preta path attempted to siphon from him the Nine Tails chakra he had, and to a point he was successful. Minato felt his chakra draining, but as he did so, he awakened Sage Mode, which turned the Preta path to stone. Minato would flip over the human path, using it as a shield. Holding its arm with one hand and forming a Rasengan with the other, he forced the human path forward into the Asura path before smashing them both with a Rasengan. Only the Diva remained. You've lost the cloak of your tailed beast, and with that, the power you held above me. Your fate is all but sealed. Minato looked back with eyes bearing the horizontal markings of a Toad Sage Mode user. You fail to understand. With or without my tailed beast, I can and will destroy you. The Diva Path attempted to use Almighty Push on the ground to strike Minato, but Minato dodged to the left and then threw a kunai up at Pain. As Minato was dragged through the air, Pain readied his chakra rod to impale him. But at that moment, Minato utilized Flying Raijin to switch places with his kunai. He then proceeded to smash Pain into the ground with a Rasengan to the back. Pain hit the ground and rolled. Minato landed and held out his kunai before his face. Today, the threat of the Akatsuki comes to an end, Minato said. Pain would pop his dislocated shoulder back into joint. Today, the leaf as you know it dies, alongside its Hokage. Minato jumped backwards and put his hands together. Summoning Jutsu! At that moment, above Pain, the massive toad Gamabunta began to fall. Pain looked up at it for but a moment before the toad crushed him under its butt. At that moment, Jiraiya appeared. Thanks for summoning my toad out from under me. Your toad, Gamabunta disputed. All the while, Minato picked up one of the rods left behind by Pain. He realized that there was a seventh Pain about a mile outside of the leaf. He looked up at the two bickering sages. "We still have one more enemy to face." Minato and Jiraiya made their way through the forest. Minato stepped in and saw what bad shape Nagato was in. He stayed by the entrance as Jiraiya stepped closer. "Nagato, what happened to you?" he asked. Nagato took a slow blink before speaking. "The world happened to me." Jiraiya shook his head without understanding. "I don't get it. You're waging war against every nation at once. I thought you wanted peace." "Peace is a lie," Nagato shouted. "Peace is a state that's impossible. Humans can't even find peace in themselves, let alone the world." "You're wrong about that," Minato said, unable to stay out of this conversation, even though it technically was no longer his business. Or, well, it wasn't his business, but it certainly was now. Pain addressed him. "How can you possibly say? A man who wages wars for a living understands how to achieve peace in the world?" Minato scoffed. "That's ironic, coming from you, but all the same, yes. A man with a heart of peace, waging war in the world, understands the root causes of war and how to end it. There are opportunistic people out there, yes, but the people all tend to want peace. People don't want to be threatened." "People fly to war so easily," Pain said. "How can a world that declares war over even a single inch of land ever know peace?" Minato then spoke. "War isn't waged off of anything but anger and fear. When someone or something you love is taken from you, you want to burn the whole world down. You want them to know the pain you knew. But in the end, all it causes is resentment. Am I saying it's wrong to want to seek justice? No, I'm not. But what is justice when you look at the grand scheme of things? When you harm innocent people because you were harmed, that's not justice. That's injustice. War is not the only option, and making the citizens of a nation suffer isn't the best way to deal with it. It just tends to be that the leaders of said nations hide behind these citizens, as do all those responsible in war. Then what is the solution to this situation? How do you bring about peace? Pain asked. Peace starts in the heart. Unless peace travels from one heart to another, war and conflict continue. So long as two people remain in this world that hate each other, war continues. War is bred through forgetting the human value and the aspect of individuality. Unity is the key to peace when it involves love, but war can also spread through unity. It's what lives in your heart that brings peace or war. It's a tragedy of being human. War is a symptom of human weakness and our own emotion and inner corruption. "So you're saying there's no solution?" Pain asked. Minato shook his head. "No, there is a solution, but that solution will never come along so long as men remain selfish. So long as I choose to hate you and you choose to hate me, war will continue, and no amount of fear-mongering will stop that. The only option to end war on this planet is for all men to love or all men to die, and that starts in the heart. Then how do we convince men to love?" Pain asked. Jiraiya was speechless. "We decide to love them. Love is peculiar. One cannot love unless they are first loved. Love is not a feeling you're born with, it's a lesson you're taught, a verb, an action, a choice. And when you love someone unconditionally, you pose a question to them, love or hate? And when they experience what love truly is, it captures their mind. Love is like some great, terribly wonderful disease that spreads the world over, infecting one heart after another. And if guarded jealously from generation to generation, peace will last forever." Pain sat there. "I'm so tired of trying to bring peace to a world that doesn't want it. I thought that by showing them all how truly war is, then they would crave peace." "The carrot and the stick," Minato said. "It makes no difference to a masochist. You'll only fuel people's need for justice, and even then, your world won't last forever. Nothing lasts forever but the wind and sky. All we do crumbles to the ground, though we refuse to see it." Pain sat there. "Is this man's lot to waste away in endless torment?" Minato shook his head. "No, man will find salvation. Love can pave a way, and all it takes is one man to start the cycle, and those he shows kindness to will do the same. I really did just want to bring peace." "I know you did," Minato said, "but this is not the way." Pain then put his hands together. He began to will the lives of those slain back through his outer path, and as life was returned, the life of Nagato was fading away, the color of his hair turning white as his life force drained out along with the pigmentation. "I pray for the world you speak of to come, Yandaime Hokage, and I pray for a place from which to see it." And from there, he perished. Konan would take the body and return to Amagakure with it. All the while, Minato comforted his mentor. "Be proud of him, Jiraiya. Even though he lost his way, he found it again at the end. It's the journey of every man to find the way, and it's only through this journey that peace can come. He understands that now." As the village began to rebuild, however, the shade of a man wearing an orange mask appeared. Taking for himself the statue of the Predapath, he began to return back to his headquarters. It was foolish of Pain to fight against Minato. In all his years, the only thing he's done is grow stronger. But now, with this, I have enough of the Nine Tails. Now I have but one left to attain. Due to these events, Minato thought it best to convene a summit, the Four Kage Summit as it would be known. Due to the untimely destruction of Suna, there were only 4 great shinobi villages now, and that would make their efforts a lot more difficult. Minato managed to rally them, but he didn't clinch the alliance until a man with a swirling mask appeared. Minato Namikaze, you seem rather alive for a dead person. Minato looked back and saw the masked man. His blood ran cold. After 16 years, the man who stole everything from him was right before him. Minato felt sweat drip down his face. I never expected you to jump bodies into that brat of yours. Fate is fickle sometimes, he said. Minato, having had enough, rushed at the masked man in his Nine Tails chakra mode, both hands grasping Rasengan. He simply passed through the man. He had forgotten about this ability, but the sudden appearance of this detail confirmed for him that this was indeed the same man. Disregarding Minato, he looked at the Raikage. Your village holds the last Jinchuriki. I require his tailed beast. If you give it to me willingly, I personally guarantee that you will not see harm come to you. The other Kage around the table looked to A. A scoffed and then snarled. We'd rather die than give you even a fart in a jar, let alone our Jinchuriki. The man stood there for a moment. How crude. Alas, it shall be ours regardless. Consider this the beginning of a new war. A world war. The 4th Shinobi World War. The man then disappeared. Do you know who he is, Minato? Meitorumi asked. Minato returned to the table, dropping his transformation. Unfortunately, I do. He's the one responsible for the attack on my village all those years ago, and for the deaths of my wife and son. Minato looked back at where the man stood. I do wonder something. He said that your village had the last Jinchuriki, Lord A. Why did he say that if I am also a Jinchuriki? That's a question I have as well, the Raikage said. Regardless of that, we have a more pressing matter to worry about, Onoki said. The 4th Shinobi World War. Who among us shall be leader of the allied shinobi forces? The group argued amidst themselves over this for quite some time, but in the end it was decided that the leader would be Minato. After all, out of all of them, he was the one with the most experience with the Akatsuki and this swirling masked man. Furthermore, the other Kage would not let go of how it was Minato who spared A during the 3rd Shinobi World War, and by honor, A owed Minato his life. And so Minato began to prepare for war. This was sadly not the way that he had hoped it would go, and he hoped that Nagato was not watching him right now. They weren't the only ones planning for war though. Kabuto had helped Obito prepare for the war by creating for him Edo Tensei. These Edo Tensei would cause no end of trouble for the allied shinobi forces, alongside the various Zetsu. However, the thing that Obito was not counting on was that Minato already had the hand signs to both free and release Edo Tensei. This threw a monkey wrench into Obito's plans, and as he attempted to have Zetsu enter the camps of the allied shinobi forces, Minato could sense it with his Nine Tails chakra mode. Due to this, they quickly made it to the site of the Geto statue as reported by the scouts. However, they were not quick enough to stop Obito from adding to it the 8 tails, which had somehow been caught despite A's best efforts to hide it. But Minato was adamant that they could not utilize the full 10 tails, as Obito did not possess the 9 tails to top it off with. However, as they drew closer, Obito revealed that he had Predapath's toad statue, which still possessed in it a large portion of the 9 tails power. It would be fed to the Geto statue, causing it to awaken as the 10 tails. And then, with the Rinnegan he stole from Pain's corpse, Obito would absorb it. Then and only then did Minato learn the truth of the identity of the man who had attacked his home all of those years ago. Obito? It hit him like a ton of bricks. His life, his family, security in the Leaf, all of it had been destroyed by Minato's own student. Minato stepped forward in anger. I loved you, Obito. How could you do this? Obito looked at him and scoffed. I am what you made me to be. No, you're nothing like I made you to be, Minato said. I made you to be a shinobi of pure heart, not a mindless killer. You made me to be a weapon of war, and that's exactly what I've become. I am war incarnate. I've brought ruin upon this world, and I did so because you set me down this path at the very start, Master. You are the source of not only your own suffering, but the world's suffering. Fear not. Where you brought pain and misery, I will bring peace and happiness. All I need is for the moon to rise even a little higher. Then I can cast you all into a never-ending dream. You can live 1,000 lives of your own choosing, being whoever you want, whenever you want.
A world where the dead live again. A world where war doesn't exist. A world where only one person's heart dictates the way the world goes. A world of true peace. Minato shook his head. I won't let you cast everyone under that jutsu. Obito looked back at Minato, as if you could stop me. Minato moved toward Obito, striking at him, but his attacks were being blocked by Truthseeker orbs, as Obito didn't even flinch. The orbs gripped Minato's leg and then stretched out as a long whip. The whip cracked with Minato at the tip, sending him flying into the ground. Itachi and Sasuke helped him out. Why not let the others join in the fun, Minato? Suddenly, an army of Zetsu stronger than before rushed from below Obito's feet, toward that resistance that served as humanity's last bastion of hope against Obito's world of lies. Minato stood there. He looked at Sasuke and Itachi. You help the others. I'll deal with this on my own. The two of them nodded. Minato stood there against Obito. The power of the Ten Tails dwarfed his own, but Minato knew that there was more to winning a battle than pure strength. He once more rushed at Obito, but stopped the attack just before it hit. Instead, he went around with body flicker to attack from behind. Obito would disappear as well with the flicker before reappearing and utilizing the same attack Minato was going to use. He knew that Obito had one weakness, but he needed an opening. Minato would form two Rasengan in his hand and attempt to attack one only to be struck from behind and then the side. Suddenly, Obito appeared above him and dropped down. Obito shook his head in disappointment. Your emotions have made you weak. Not that you stood a chance against me with or without them. Obito would lift his staff and push it into Minato's stomach. He pushed it deeper as blood began to run from the wound. That was what Minato was waiting for. He then rushed forward and grabbed Obito. Being a Jinchuriki as well, and both of them having a portion of the Nine Tails, they were connected by their minds. What do you think you're doing? Obito asked. If you think this is enough to stop me, then all you're doing is stalling your eventual defeat. Minato took a deep breath and let it out with a sigh. Minato looked at him. Come over here and sit with me, for old time's sake. Obito decided to humor the wishes of a dying man. He sat down beside him. Tell me, Obito, why are you doing this? For the sake of the world, or have you forgotten? Minato shook his head. Peace through war. An adage I've heard enough in my lifetime. But that's not what I'm asking. There was a time when you wanted nothing more than to be a shinobi. I was so proud of you. That changed and now you wish to destroy all shinobi? What took you from point A to point B? My eyes were opened. Minato turned to look at him head on. Obito began to explain his story to Minato, about meeting Madara, about the death of Rin and how that affected him. Minato looked up. So this is about Rin, huh? More than that. It's about the world, Obito retorted. But it started out about Rin, your own pain. Obito couldn't deny it. Obito, I've suffered like you have. I lost my wife, my child, and then my body. I now live as a shell of someone else. The pain I feel is immense. It eats at me every day. And I know I'm not the only one. Itachi feels that pain. He had to kill his clan, his parents, by his own hands, and then exiling himself. Cursed and spat upon by the village he sacrificed everything for, and forced to hide who he truly was just to spy on your organization, all while the last person he loved was filled with hatred for him and sought to kill him. Pain himself was filled with pain, as his name implies. Losing his health, his family, and his heart. He sought peace in a world at war, but ended up becoming war as well. It's all the same, told over and over and over again, but I came out of it. I found peace. Do you know why? Obito shook his head. Minato continued. Because I chose it. Obito scoffed, as if well wishes will bring true lasting peace. As if they can fill the holes in a broken heart. Isn't that what you're trying to do? Minato asked. Obito stood. No, I'm bringing real peace. I'm bringing back the dead that live on only in the hearts of those they left behind. You know that's a lie, Obito, Minato said as he stood. You can't let her go, but you don't realize what a genjutsu is. Tsukiyomi is a genjutsu, Obito, and genjutsu is an illusory technique. You learned this in the academy. It's an illusion, it's not real. The peace you bring isn't real peace. The Rin you bring back won't be a real Rin. It'll all be nothing more than an illusion. It's better than nothing, Obito shouted. It's not, because it is nothing. You wish to retreat into that world of your own without heartache and trials, but the world doesn't work like that. Nor should it. It's a childish dream of people who never grew up. How can you say that? Obito asked. I could give you Kushina back, and Naruto, and you could throw it all away. Why don't you want it too? I do want it, Minato said. I want it so bad that I can't stand it, but in the end, it's not real. It's not them. I'll be lying to myself, and deep down, I'll know it. They'll be a figment of my imagination, all while the real Kushina and Naruto are left alone in the afterlife. I'll be forsaking my actual love and child for one conjured by my imagination. This is not what Kushina and Naruto would want. And you need to ask yourself, what is it that Rin would want? What would Rin say to you if she saw you right now? Could she love the Obito who's doing this? Obito's constitution broke as he fell to his knees, crying like the child he never grew out of being. It hurts too much, Minato-sensei. I can't live without her. Minato knelt down and hugged Obito. You won't. There is one bit of truth to what you said. The dead leave a piece of themselves behind in those they care about. They leave behind love. That love will guide you. Neither time, nor space, nor life or death can separate us from the love they share with us. Rin is, right now, somewhere loving you, and your love for her reaches her. But it's time to let go, Obito. Obito looked at his mentor. I don't think I can. Minato smiled. Yes, you can. You just have to decide to. And in that moment, they were back in their own bodies. The 10 tails ejected out of Obito, with all 8 beasts rushing off from the battlefield. Obito then realized he'd stabbed his master. No, Minato-sensei, please don't die. Minato smiled. I'm proud of you, Obito. He then fell to his knees. Please, master, don't die. Minato smiled. I'm not going to. You didn't hit anything important. Most of my intestines are gone anyway. You pierced a mostly empty cavity. Obito was shocked as Minato tried to laugh through the pain. That was not as easy as it seemed though. In the end, the war came to a close, and Obito turned himself over. Due to his actions against not only Konoha, but the world, Minato was unable to secure for him the pardon as he wanted. However, he did manage to dissuade the other Kage from giving him the death penalty. Instead, he'd be sent to the blood prison, where he would serve out the rest of his natural life behind bars. A sad ending for his apprentice, but he was glad that Obito saw the light. From this, the world began to wonder if what Minato said was true. Could kindness and love truly offer peace to the world simply from the heart of man? Goodwill between leaders began to spring up, bonds between the Kage and those that worked for them, and slowly it echoed out from the villages to the nations round about, and for the first time in a long time, in thousands of years, the world knew peace. And Minato, well, he continued to serve as Hokage for the village hidden in the leaves until his dying days. Having promised to live a full life to both his mentor Jiraiya as well as to his own family, Kushina and Naruto, Minato did exactly that. Peace reigned, but not always would it be that way. Troubles would come, but when they did, everyone knew that the yellow flash of the leaf would be there to stop it. And that's the end of the series, folks. I hope you enjoyed this hour-long blowout. In fact, it might be a little longer than an hour. Either way, I thought you guys might like to see something special. Now, of course, the story doesn't exactly have to end here. Bonus parts are possible if you all want to see it. But if you do, this video better get blown out of the water with likes, comments, and shares. Make it go viral, and maybe we'll get to see Minato in the last movie. Or perhaps even during the age of Boruto Naruto Next Generations. Would you like to see that? If so, then do all the good stuff I said before. And don't forget to subscribe as well, and click that bell icon so you can actually get the notification should that next video drop. And since I'm such a nice guy, I'll even recommend you some more videos that might catch your eye. Anyway, from everyone here at the Amagi, we love you all, and peace out.